Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm back. I had a great weekend. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Let's have another great late night conversation.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another one of our great late night chats. We'll be doing it the same way that we always do, which is that we'll do a roll call after the opening remarks, and then I answer your super chats for the remainder of the night. So opening remarks first, then the roll call. Then if you have any questions that you've sent via super chat or via Rumble Rant, I will answer them. I do need you all to send super chats because they make the second half of the show happen. So keep that in mind. Now, folks, I will say I had an amazing weekend. I went up to Boston for the weekend. I got to see Noah. Shout out to Noah, great CPI organizer in the city of Boston. It was great to see him. Also got to see Reverend Milhan Stevens, my good friend, who's just transferred from being the pastor of Manhattan Family Church to being the pastor of Boston Family Church. And it was really, really great to see Reverend Milhan Stevens. They had a great ceremony for him at Boston Family Church, inaugurating him as the pastor there. Very, very moving and very sweet, very dedicated man. So I'm feeling good. And my focus right now is on what's coming up next week. Next week is going to be next Monday, January 20th is going to be a historic day. Donald Trump will become president of the United States. He will be taking the oath of office. Now, we are going to be part of history as it happens in Washington, D.C. We're going to be in the streets of Washington, D.C. with our beautiful banner of Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands. We're also going to be in the streets with another banner calling on Donald Trump to build a bridge connecting the United States to Alaska, to Russia, the Peace Bridge over the Bering Sea. And then that night, we're having an event in Washington, D.C. We are having a reception. And it's going to be great. Music, speeches. Garland Nixon will be there. Jamarl Thomas will be there. Peter Coffin will be there. Reverend Milhan Stevens will be there. It looks like Dr. Wilmer Leon will be there. It looks like, a number of great folks will be there. And it is going to be great. It'll be food for the first 50 people who come. You can have salmon, or you can have... it looks like the menu options will be salmon or the other option will be prime rib. It's going to be a great buffet. Starting at 5:30, there's going to be music. Brian is coming down to play music, speeches, presentations. It's going to be a great evening. Everyone who comes is going to get a nice gift bag, while supplies last, of course, right? But my wife has been making these beautiful T-shirts with Trump and Kim shaking hands. It's going to be a great, great event. We're calling it A New Day for America. Meet the Innovationists. And after a day in the streets of D.C., we will then be heading to have a lovely, lovely reception. So if you're coming, please let us know. Please let us know that you're going to be there. It's a public event, but, let us know that you're coming. Go ahead and register so that we can plan on you being there, send out any updates or anything that might happen. That would be great. Also, if you would like to help us offset the costs, because this event is costing us a shit ton. I'll just tell you that. It is costing us a lot of money. This is not a cheap event to put on. Nothing in this life, they say you get what you paid for, and this is going to be a great event, but it's Inauguration Day. We're having a food minimum with the hotel, and it's going to cost us, and we've paid many thousands of dollars, at least $10,000 already to make this event happen. So between the travel out of town and all the arrangements and the food minimum of the hotel, and it's costing us a lot. So if you could donate to our Inauguration Day activities, that would make our lives a little bit easier. If you can't be there, another way you can help out is to donate. Donations are always appreciated. So here's the link to the GoFundMe where you can donate to our Inauguration Day activities. It's going to be great. We are heading to Washington, D.C. To be there in the middle of history when Donald Trump takes the oath, to be there to spread our anti-imperialist message. And it's going to be absolutely awesome. I am so excited. Hilton Garden Inn, 815 14th Street Northwest, just a few blocks from the White House. Food, music, speeches. It's going to be amazing. Please join us. Please be there. You'll get to meet me. And on top of that, if you're not able to be there, it's going to be live streamed. It's going to be live streamed, not just on this channel, but on Garland Nixon's channel, on Jamarl Thomas's channel, on the CPI channel, on Peter Coffin's channel. So it'll be live streamed. You can watch live. Isn't that going to be awesome? It's going to be a really great day for America. We are ready to throw off the pessimism of Joe Biden, the pessimism of degrowth, Malthusianism, and all of that. We'll get into all of that on the stream, but I have never been more excited for a president to take office than I am currently for Donald Trump to take office. That said, Donald Trump's presidency, there will certainly be plenty for us to argue with and challenge. We offer no blind support to any leader, but I have a feeling that some good things are going to happen in the Trump administration. And even if they don't, what matters is being out there and engaging with the people who voted for Trump because they wanted those good things to happen. So it's going to be, Funky will be there. You'll get to meet Funky. It's going to be a great day in DC. So come join us. If you can't make it, throw us a donation to offset the costs. It's going to be great. Not too many other announcements. I did want to announce that my book about the killing of Brian Thompson and the danger of American years of lead is back on Amazon. They took it down, and it's back on Amazon, but it has a different title. In order to get it approved on Amazon, I had to remove this first section, this first thing, the killing of Brian Thompson. You're not allowed to have titles about recent tragic events. So the title on Amazon is The Danger of an American Years of Lead. It's the same book, just with a different title. But because Amazon is weird about that, to get it through the Amazon censors, we gave it a different title. So on Lulu, it's called The Killing of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead. On Amazon, it's called The Danger of an American Years of Lead. It's the exact same book, but that's the way these things work, right? Censorship, and it's whatever. So just wanted to let you all know that that's happening, and a lot of stuff is in the works. So see you in DC on January 20th. It's going to be a great day. We are going to be out there representing anti-imperialism and the exciting new economy happening in the world. And we're going to be in DC, and we're really, really glad that we're going to be in DC. Yes, Amazon is judging a book by its cover, so we got it through. There you go. So see you in DC January 20th. And we're going to be talking about January 20th in DC, but not the great stuff that we'll be doing. We're going to be talking about some other things that are planning to happen in DC. We'll be talking about that later tonight, as we get into the opening remarks. But folks, so second half of the show is all you. I need super chats and rumble rants, so I have something to talk about in the second half of the show. So please be generous and send super chats and rumble rants. Get me to respond and engage with you all think of something for me to talk about in the second half of the show. I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. Folks, I don't quite know where to begin. Honestly, I'm a little bit at a loss. Because there are some things in this world that are very, very, very obvious. And there are people whose job it is to practice a kind of witchcraft, a kind of voodoo, a kind of mind game, a Jedi mind trick to try and make it not obvious. And that can be very frustrating to observe. But I'm going to start out by stating a few things that should be obvious. Number one, is Donald Trump a great anti-imperialist or a communist? No. Is anyone claiming that? No. Trump murdered Qasem Soleimani. Trump is on record as being a big supporter of Israel. So no one here has any illusion that Donald Trump is going to ride in on a white horse and end American imperialism, capitalism in its monopolistic stage. No one thinks that. However, another thing that should be obvious, does the American pro-war establishment like Donald Trump? No. Why do you think they've accused Donald Trump of being involved in some kind of conspiracy with Russia? Why do you think they have condemned endlessly Donald Trump's efforts to make peace on the Korean Peninsula? Why do you think that they constantly compare Donald Trump to Xi Jinping, to Kim Jong-un, to Putin, to Fidel Castro? Why? Why do you think that? It's very obvious that the opposition to Trump comes from people who are more pro-war than Trump is. It's very, very, very obvious that the opposition to Donald Trump comes from people that are less in favor of peace with Russia than Trump is. It's very, very obvious that the opposition to Donald Trump comes from people that are less in favor of peace with North Korea than Trump is. Whatever Trump's problems, and there are plenty, and I was one of his biggest critics in his first term, and I stand by the bulk of what I said. I think his policies in his first term, his foreign policies, were greatly lacking. They were certainly better than Biden's, but they were still greatly lacking, especially in the Middle East. But that said, the opposition to Trump is not coming from people who want him to be less hawkish and less confrontational with Russia and less confrontational with China and it's coming from people who wanted him to be more hostile to Russia. One of the main differences between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in this past election was Kamala Harris said, I'm going to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to fight this war in Ukraine till the end. Ukraine must win, and we're going to keep unloading billions and billions of dollars into Ukraine. Whereas Donald Trump said, I'm going to end this war. And they said, well, don't you want Ukraine to win, Donald? And he said, no, I want the killing to stop. That's what Donald Trump said. So the opposition to Trump is more pro-war, not less pro-war. That's obvious. And if you don't believe that, and if you choose not to acknowledge that, that's because you're being willfully blind. Number two, the opposition to Donald Trump is less in favor of civil liberties than Trump is. Why do you think Donald Trump has appointed Kash Patel, a longtime critic of the FBI, to be FBI director? Why do you think Tucker Carlson supported the Uhuru movement and defended them, while none of the left-wing media would? MSNBC didn't support Uhuru. CNN did not support Uhuru. New York Times didn't support the Uhuru. All the liberal outlets, NPR, none of them supported Chairman O'Malley and the Uhuru movement. But Tucker Carlson and Fox News and Glenn Beck, they defended Chairman O'Malley and the Uhuru Three and highlighted their case. Tucker Carlson even did a long-form interview when the African People's Socialist Party, a black revolutionary group, had their homes raided by the FBI and were indicted for being agents of Russia simply because they advocated peace. All the liberals supported the FBI. But the support that the Uhuru got, the support that the Uhuru movement got, came from Tucker Carlson, came from Glenn Beck, came from people on the conservative side. Facebook just announced that it's not going to have fact checkers any longer. And that's a good thing because Facebook's fact checkers were pro-NATO. They fact-checked anything that was critical of the pro-NATO, pro-FBI establishment, and they silenced and suppressed opinions that aren't. Who's mad that the Facebook fact-checkers are gone? Who's mad about that? The liberals. And who is glad that the fact-checkers are gone? Donald Trump. And in fact, they're even accusing Facebook of kissing up to Donald Trump by getting rid of their fact checkers. The opposition to Donald Trump does not come from a good place. No matter how bad you think Donald Trump is, if you are at all in favor of the right to free speech, the right to promote anti-imperialism, the right to engage in activism against imperialism, you have to admit that the people who oppose Trump want to silence you much more than Trump does. And if you are at all against billions and billions and billions of American tax dollars going to this Ukraine conflict, if you're at all against spending our tax money and positioning thousands of American soldiers in South Korea and provoking a confrontation with North Korea, you must admit that the people who oppose Donald Trump are more in favor of U.S. troops in South Korea and confrontation with North Korea, and more in favor of prolonging the war in Ukraine than Trump is. If you are part of the liberal Stop Trump movement, you are more pro-FBI than Trump. If you are part of the liberal Stop Trump movement, you are more pro-war than Trump. It's not a matter of how good Trump is. It's a matter of from whence side are you criticizing him? The Stop Trump movement, the Orange Man Bad movement, the Trump is an agent of Putin movement, the Trump is a dictator just like Putin movement, is more pro-war, more pro-FBI, more pro-censorship than Donald Trump. And yes, there are plenty of things that Donald Trump has done that are not in favor of civil liberties. Plenty to criticize. There's plenty of things that Donald Trump has done that are not anti-war sufficiently. And I'm all for criticizing that. But the Stop Trump movement does not represent you. You know, during the civil rights era, Dr. Martin Luther King was a very flawed individual. Very, very flawed. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. supported Israel. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not support black people arming themselves to protect themselves from the Ku Klux Klan. He was for only nonviolence. He denounced Robert F. Williams and his call for armed self-defense. He denounced Malcolm X as a violent radical. So, you know, you can criticize Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. all you want. Zionist, not in favor of armed self-defense, not in favor of black nationalism. But would disagreeing with Dr. Martin Luther King for not being a revolutionary anti-imperialist, for being an advocate of imperialism amid his, in a pro-civil rights stance, would that then justify joining the Ku Klux Klan? Obviously not. When Dr. Martin Luther King had a rally, crowds of violent people with masks on their faces and hoods went out and called for lynching and murdering Dr. Martin Luther King. And there were plenty of people who were critical of Dr. Martin Luther King, didn't agree with his support for Israel, didn't agree with his opposition to armed self-defense, didn't agree with his support for the Democratic Party, whatever. But they knew that the Ku Klux Klan was obviously coming from a bad place, that whatever your criticism of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, the Klan was not coming from a good place. But yet, I continue to meet people who say, well, I'm not sure Trump is really anti-imperialist. Well, no one says he is. I'm not sure that Trump is totally anti-war. I'm not sure Trump really means all the good things he said about ending the war in Ukraine. Okay, neither am I. Fine. I'm not going to argue with you about that. I mean, Trump's first term was not great. But based on that, they're going to go join the Ku Klux Klan. They're going to go join the crowds that want Donald Trump removed from office, the crowds of people that call Trump a Russian agent, the crowds of people who support the FBI. That's what they're doing. That's saying, oh, well, Dr. Martin Luther King supported Israel. I'm joining the Klan. No. Right? And this is what I continue to see. People who, well, there's this thing I don't like about Trump, so it's okay for me to join a pro-NATO, pro-war, pro-FBI campaign against Trump. And they try to do everything they can to confuse it. And I think part of that is because of the heroic work that we have done as the Center for Political Innovation. And I'll get into that soon, right? But, folks, facts are facts, right? There is probably going to be a riot on Inauguration Day. I really hope there isn't, but I think, there's going to be. And that rally is going to be facilitated. That riot is going to be facilitated by a protest march staged by the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the PSL. They have got a permit. They are organizing the march. And they are basically playing the role of the Ku Klux Klan, right? There's going to be Antifa people there with masks on their faces. And last time Trump was sworn in, Antifa people were out there and they torched cars and they destroyed property and they injured people. And it was an ugly display of violence. And the Party for Socialism and Liberation, that claims to be anti-imperialist, that claims to not want billions of American tax dollars to go into Ukraine, that claims to not support the FBI, is facilitating a pro-NATO mobilization to try and prevent Trump from standing up to the FBI, to try and prevent Donald Trump from standing up to the Pentagon. And there's no way around this. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, the PSL, is facilitating a pro-NATO riot. And if you call them out on that, they'll say, oh, we're against NATO. We're against NATO. That's funny. That's so funny because John Bolton said that if Donald Trump ever takes office, NATO is going to be dissolved. And, I didn't notice PSL staging a big riot when Joe Biden took office. 4 years ago, Joe Biden took office and PSL said nothing. In fact, PSL condemned the Democrats for not imprisoning more Trump supporters. In fact, PSL condemned Trump for the January 6th events and said they believe in a peaceful transfer of power. was the most cringe interview. Look it up. Brian Becker called out Donald Trump for not having a peaceful transfer of power and said the Democrats were weak because they didn't imprison more Trump supporters. So, no riot last inauguration. No riot against Genocide Joe getting inaugurated. No riot against Kamala Harris getting inaugurated as vice president. But this year, they're facilitating and staging a riot against Donald Trump. And of course, they're saying it's going to be a peaceful, legal rally. But we all know what happened the last time Trump was sworn in. I was a guest today. I mean, it was recorded yesterday, but it aired today on the George Galloway show. And I want to show you, this is what I said. This is a small segment from my appearance on the George Galloway show. This is what I said.
Finally, and you may say it's hardly worth talking about, but I have an interest in it. The Democrats they went for bust. They pushed old Joe off the cliff. They put the most doltish alternative they could find, the subject of your masterful biography of Kamala Harris, which everyone should still read. They put her in. It was a big gamble. They spent, I think, $1.3 billion, even though they're a few $100 million short, I understand, in debt. Are they finished now? Might they split now? After all, this is a party without any trace of what it was supposed to be. It was, if you like, its DNA was supposed to be the blue-collar party, the working-class party, the party that wanted peace, the party that wanted American jobs, and so on. It is so far from that now, rather like the British so-called Labour Party. Is it time to call it a day for the American masses with the Democratic Party?
Well, it's interesting because we're hearing some Democratic Party voices saying it's time to change their strategy, that they need to stop telling American workers that they're voting against their own interest in a condescending way. They need to look into what working class values in America really are. But that said, my concern is about Inauguration Day, because we saw what happened the last time Donald Trump was inaugurated. There was a huge amount of violence in the streets of Washington, D.C. There are sections of the American intelligence apparatus that are hoping to weaken the Trump presidency with violent provocations. I am concerned about security in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. I'm going to be in D.C., my organization, the Center for Political Innovation. We will be there engaging with Trump supporters. We have a banner of Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands that says only peace can make America great again. We're going to engage with Trump supporters about opposing imperialism and building peace around the world. And we're having an event, a reception that evening in Washington, D.C. But we're going to be there to engage with those who voted for Trump because they want peace. But I'm very concerned about what the Answer Coalition, led by Brian Becker, is planning. They have staged and got permits for a demonstration that is taking place on that day. And they say it's going to be peaceful, but we saw what happened last time Trump took office. The cars that were torched, the people that were injured, the many young people who were caught up in that and arrested. If Brian Becker and the Answer Coalition are to be responsible, they need to cancel this demonstration. People voted for Trump because they want to make peace around the world. Donald Trump was elected on a platform of getting the USA out of the Ukraine conflict, and he's opposed by the foreign policy establishment. And we know that this demonstration they are planning is going to be utilized by provocateurs, by Antifa elements to try and taint the Trump presidency with violence. The Answer Coalition needs to cancel their demonstration that is taking place on Trump's inauguration. They need to call it off so that they cannot facilitate the provocative actions being planned by the pro-NATO faction of the deep state. Let's recall that John Bolton, who served in Trump's administration, said that if Donald Trump was ever elected and ever took office again, the USA would leave the NATO alliance. I hope John Bolton is right. We need to leave the NATO alliance. And the opposition to Trump is coming from the foreign policy establishment. This isn't a guarantee that Trump is going to do good things, but if there's any possibility of things improving, it means that those of us who want U.S. relations around the world and the U.S. wars all across the planet to de-escalate, we need to loudly support any positive action that Donald Trump might take. So my hope is that the Answer Coalition, which claims to be an anti-war organization, will cancel their demonstration, their rally that is basically going to become a space for provocateurs working on behalf of NATO to destabilize Washington, D.C. If they are truly anti-war, they need to cancel their demonstration. That is my call for the Answer Coalition, for the Palestine activists. They need to call off the provocative demonstration planned for Trump's Inauguration Day. Yep. That's what I said. And I want to show you all something while we're on this topic. I want to show you all something because there's a lot more to this than just the upcoming pro-NATO riot. I want to show you this. This is an article in the Guardian newspaper. Now, the Guardian is a newspaper in Britain that is the voice of the Labour Party. And the Guardian ran article after article claiming that Donald Trump was an agent of Russia. Yet, the Guardian ran this article that is basically an advertisement for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We are working class women of color. The long shot socialist run for the White House. And this article says nothing negative about PSL. You know, PSL, they could disagree with them about, you know, their support for China, their support for North Korea or Cuba, but doesn't bring it up. They just ran this advertisement, a newspaper that is one of the primary voices claiming that Trump is secretly an agent of Putin, ran an advertisement for the Party of Socialism and Liberation under the guise of an article. This was basically an unpaid campaign ad in the pro-NATO British press. This is an endorsement from MI6. That's what this is. You know, that's all this article is. This is MI6 and British intelligence telling us PSL works for us. That's what this is. You'll notice that nothing in this article criticizing any of their international stances, nothing in this article that would cause any liberal to question anything. This is just a campaign advertisement from the British imperialists, right? It is a controlled op paper. It's a paper that peddles pro-imperialist lies, but for some reason, there's one group of so-called anti-imperialists that they really like. But it's much deeper than this, because if there's anything that I continue to come back to, it's this. All right, folks, I am at the point where I will admit to you there's plenty of things that Karl Marx said and did that I disagree with. All right, I think Karl Marx's philosophy of dialectical materialism is wrong and harmful, right? The idea that change can only come through conflict, and we need to escalate conflict. I want to see forgiveness and unity and reconciliation in this world. That's what I want to see. The idea that there's only material, there's no God, there's no spiritual forces, that's wrong. I draw a lot of strength from my spirituality. So I am the first to tell you there are things that Karl Marx said that I vehemently disagree with. And that said, in this book, Theories of Surplus Value by Karl Marx, you will read a thorough critique of Malthusianism. Karl Marx, as an economist living in Britain, he was in exile in Britain after he fled from Germany. He was surrounded with the economic philosophy of the British Empire, which is there are too many people in the world, overpopulation. And Karl Marx said that Malthusianism was one of the most evil ideas ever invented. And Karl Marx wrote an entire book explaining why the idea that overpopulation is the cause of economic problems in the world is not just wrong, it's evil. It is satanic. And Karl Marx wrote this very, very good book called Theories of Surplus Value, explaining that no, overpopulation does not cause economic problems. And actually, human labor and human creativity is the source of all wealth. And that you want to increase the population because the more people you have, the more work they can do. And with their bodies and with their minds, they can create and they can innovate and they can make more wealth. And that the concept of overpopulation that was being promoted by the British Empire, that was being promoted by all the British bankers and monopolies, that idea was evil. And it was essentially an attack on the concept of historical progress. And Karl Marx worked very, very hard. And you read Theories of Surplus Value and read his critique of Ricardo, his critique of Robert Malthus, his critique of Adam Smith. Marx goes through all the major economists of his day and he critiques their ideas. And Karl Marx showed that the problem in his day, just like the problem now, is not that there's too many people. The problem is the irrational organization of the economy. We have an economy where the banks and the factories and the centers of economic power operate to maximize profits for a wealthy few. And because of that, we have a problem that's never existed anywhere before in history. The problem of overproduction or the value crisis. People becoming homeless because there are too many houses. People becoming hungry because there is too much food. This isn't rational. And the capitalist mode of production, as Marx observed it, in which the market is allowed to run rampant, creates a situation where the more wealth that is produced, the fewer people that are hired. And it creates a problem called glut, G-L-U-T, glut, where the economy breaks down because too much wealth has been created. And that doesn't make any sense. And that technological leaps should be a great thing. No one should ever be unemployed or lose their job because technology advances. Technological leaps should be a great thing. Self-driving cars should be a great thing because it means this job called driving is no longer necessary. But in our irrational economy, self-driving cars would lead to riots in the streets. There'd be millions of truck drivers, millions of Uber drivers, and state traffic patrolmen, state highway patrolmen, and traffic court employees, and all kinds of people would lose their jobs if we had self-driving cars. That's not rational. That's not rational, right? The idea that human labor power is intensified by technological leaps should lead to more wealth for everybody. But in our deeply irrational system, it leads to greater poverty. We have a system where in the United States, the U.S. government buys millions and millions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri. Why? Why does it do that? It does that so the price of dairy stays high enough that the farmers and the agricultural sectors can stay afloat. This isn't rational. And the problem isn't that there's too many people. The problem is we have an economy that functions according to the chaos of the market. And that if we can get beyond the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market, if we can rationally organize our economy, we can have so much wealth and generate so much wealth that we can create a new world, that we could create a society without the need for a government, without any poverty, without any scarcity, where people would only have to work because they feel like working, where there's no need for any kind of coercion, where there's basically equality because there's just enough to go around for everybody. If we could get over the irrationality of the market, human growth and human creativity and intelligence could explode. And that would lead to a bigger population, and that would lead to a longer life expectancy, and that would lead to a more comfortable life for all. We could eradicate poverty and unleash human growth and innovation to even higher levels. That's what Marx wrote about. And whatever you want to criticize Marx for, the dialectical material philosophy, I'm with you. The aesthetic of rebellion and the French Revolution, I'm with you. But when Marx talked about how there's no such thing as overpopulation, and that overpopulation is a satanic lie, and that human beings are not a cancer on Mother Earth, we're not non-producing consumers, non-productive consumers, we're not useless eaters, we're rather the source of all wealth. That human labor and human productivity and human creativity is the main mechanism through which wealth is created, through which humanity marches to higher stages, and that human beings have a beautiful intelligence, a soul, something that separates them from animals. That's amazing. When Karl Marx talks about that, I'm all about Karl Marx. And that anti-Malthusian understanding in Marxism, that celebration of human creativity and brilliance in Marxism, that understanding that we need to liberate the means of production from the irrationality of the capitalist system so that growth can be unleashed to even higher levels, and we can overcome the irrational boom-bust cycle and organize the means of production so we can have more and more wealth than ever before. That is the Marxism that I hold on to. I don't agree with Karl Marx on spiritual and philosophical matters. I don't appreciate the Marxist aesthetic that attaches itself to the French Revolution, etc. But when it comes to what he understood about economics, I'm with Marx. And this is what they believe in China. Deng Xiaoping, the leader of the Chinese government from the 1970s and 80s, he said poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious. And if you look at all these socialist and communist governments around the world, what do? They build. They build power plants. They build highways. They build high-speed railway systems. They build hospitals. They build schools. They eradicate illiteracy. I have been to Nicaragua, and I have seen how the socialist Christian government of Nicaragua has spread electrification all across the country and electrified every region of the country and wiped out illiteracy in Nicaragua and enabled millions of Nicaraguans to open their own farms, open their own businesses with their micro-entrepreneurship program, enabled the creation of thousands and thousands of worker cooperatives. They believe in growth in Nicaragua, and they believe in socialist economics and Marx's understanding that if you control the means of production and overcome the irrationality of the market, you can create a huge amount of growth. Very good. And that's what they believe in China. And that's what they believed in the Soviet Union. And that's what they believe in the anti-imperialist countries of the world. Meanwhile, if you listen to the World Economic Forum, what are they saying? Overpopulation, overpopulation, overpopulation. There's too many people. They're saying what Malthus said. There's too many people in the world. Overpopulation. You'll live in a pod. You've got to live in a pod and eat bugs. You'll own nothing and be happy about it. We've got to reduce the population. And they're talking about the population bomb, and they're talking about limits to growth, and they're talking about driving down living standards, and they are panicking because big chunks of the world are not under the control of Wall Street and London anymore, and that if humanity continues to march ahead, we're not going to have a unipolar world. Right now, the world is unipolar. It's centered around Wall Street and London. Their globalist, imperialist system, the rule of the world by big banks and monopolies based in Western corporations. The only way that system can remain intact is if human progress stops. If we stop growing. And if we don't stop growing, eventually this world is going to have multipolarity. China is rising up. It's the second largest economy in the world. Russia is expanding and has raised so many countries out of poverty and has connected with so many African countries and built and constructed. And Iran is a very important country in the Middle East region that is connected to people all throughout the region who believe in development and growth. And we're going to have a multipolar world. And so the World Economic Forum, Wall Street, and London, just like back in Karl Marx's day, they're pushing the notion growth is bad, overpopulation. That's what they're pushing. Meanwhile, the anti-imperialist countries, they may not be pushing Karl Marx's philosophy. They may not be pushing the red flag aesthetic. A lot of them believe in traditional family values. A lot of them are Christians or Muslims. You know, Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, he's Roman Catholic. Daniel Ortega, the leader of Nicaragua, is Roman Catholic. The leader of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zhuganov, he's an Orthodox Christian. The Iranians don't believe in Marxism at all. They are Islamic socialists, or they preach not capitalism but Islam. They're Shia Muslims, but all of them believe in growth. And they believe that you have to have a government of action that controls the means of production to make sure that growth continues. That's the fight in the world today. It is the fight between the imperialist globalists and their desire to stop human growth and their belief in Malthusian economics, and the people of the world that want to continue growing, that want to keep having children, that want a better life expectancy, that want economic development, and are breaking out of the imperialist system in order to get it. And they're breaking out by creating popular governments, governments of action that fight for working families and kick out the international bankers. That's the fight in the world today. What side is the Party for Socialism and Liberation on? They are on the World Economic Forum side. They are on the Malthusian degrowth side. And they made that abundantly clear in their election campaign. And I quoted, we have an article on our Center for Political Innovation website where we quoted their very campaign platform. Their campaign platform called for dismantling the U.S. power grid. I am not exaggerating. You can't make this up. It sounds too absurd and ridiculous. But one of the planks of their campaign literally said, they wanted to get rid of every single fossil fuel-based energy source in the United States and replace it with fossil fuels, which would reduce electrification of America to roughly 25% of what it currently is, right? I mean, their platform was dismantling the U.S. power grid. It's really bizarre because Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, what did he do? He built the world's largest power plant at the time, the Dnieper Dam in Ukraine. What does the Chinese Communist Party do? They built the world's largest power plant, the Three Gorges Dam in China. I mean, Nicaragua, the socialist government, has electrified the whole country. China goes all over the world and builds power plants. All the communist governments, Gaddafi, he electrified Libya. He built the world's largest irrigation system. Communists all over the world, when they come to power, they drive out the imperialists and they build. But the platform of the Party for Socialism and Liberation is dismantle the power grid. Get rid of every single nuclear power plant in America. Get rid of every single oil and coal power plant in America and replace it with a windmill and replace it with solar panels. Communists all over the world build power plants. PSL's platform in the election was to dismantle the U.S. power grid. Why? Because PSL works for the World Economic Forum and it works for the British Empire, and they are Malthusian degrowthers. That's why. That's why. And that's why, even though many people around the world are hoping that Donald Trump will make a deal that will end the Palestine conflict, the whole world is holding its breath. As we understand, Netanyahu is very angry and that a deal is in the works. The whole world is holding its breath that Donald Trump will end the Palestine conflict and hold back Israel. The whole world is waiting to see Donald Trump meet with Putin and bring an end to the Ukraine war. The whole world is excited that Tulsi Gabbard might be the director of the U.S. intelligence agencies, a woman who warned about the danger of arming terrorists in Syria, a woman who spoke loudly in support of peace with North Korea, a woman who spoke loudly against regime change wars. Everyone's excited about Tulsi Gabbard being director of national intelligence. Everyone's excited about Kash Patel being the head of the FBI to stop the FBI from violating the rights of Americans. But PSL is aligned with MSNBC. It's aligned with CNN. And it's not just putting out woke stop Trump propaganda. They are literally planning to facilitate the violence on election day. They've got the permits and they've set up the stage and they're going to have the march. And of course, they will say, oh, we want it to be peaceful. And maybe it won't be them who does the violence, but their rally will become the basis, the rallying point, the organizing center for the Antifa violence intended to taint Trump's presidency. PSL is not an anti-imperialist organization. But understanding why they can say, oh, we support China, oh, we're anti-imperialist, understanding how they can say that and not really mean it is really educational. Folks, I'm not going to stop PSL from organizing their rally. Look, I mean, if you want to call them on the phone, I recommend give the People's Forum a call and tell them to call off the rally. I recommend we raise the alarm. They're not going to call off the rally because I said it. They're raising way too much money and they're doing this. The reason we're talking about this is because we need to understand our own beliefs. And that, as I started out this stream saying, I feel like it's very obvious where the Stop Trump movement is coming from. Very obvious. I feel like it's very obvious that the movement against Trump, the orange man bad, Stop Trump hysteria, is pro-FBI, pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine war, pro-Pentagon, etc., pro-censorship, etc. However, PSL works very hard to engage in a lot of voodoo and a lot of flim-flam to try and get you to think that somehow they are anti-imperialist. Somehow they don't support the Democrats. No, they're against both parties and they stand with China and they stand with Venezuela. They do a lot of fancy footwork, but the essence of what they are doing is, again, if Martin Luther King Jr. had a march and a bunch of guys in white sheets with Confederate flags mobilized against it, would you join the people with the white sheets and the Confederate flags just because Donald, Trump is would you? I mean, come on, right? They are the equivalent, the modern day equivalent of the people who gathered with Confederate flags and white sheets to protest Dr. Martin Luther King, right? That's the American people voted to oppose World War III. The American people voted to oppose FBI repression. The American people voted against the degrowth economics and inflation Joe Biden was imposing on them. And PSL is organizing a demonstration that will most likely become very violent against what the American people voted for. And whether or not they tap dance and window dress and claim that's not really what it's about, there's a reason they were advertised by the primary voice of British imperialism. The mouthpiece of Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, gave them an ad. And there's a reason that they're doing this. And that's because they're on the wrong side, but they dress it up with socialist-sounding language. Now, ever since we published our press release about how this is going to be a pro-NATO rally organized by British intelligence, PSL's been on the defensive. And they have actually adjusted a lot of the statements for their upcoming rally, saying it's not just a rally against Trump, it's a rally against the Democrats also. That's funny. They didn't organize a riot when Joe Biden took office. I didn't notice that. But they're on the defensive now. And I'm really proud. I don't think that it's because of our article necessarily. I think it's more that our article was out there and that caused a lot of people in the anti-imperialist sphere to ask them some tough questions. They're on the defensive right now. But this is a video that the PSL put out explaining how they're going to organize to stop Donald Trump's agenda. And I want you to watch it because this is a great example of tap dancing, flim flam. They try in their video to say that this is not a pro-imperialist mobilization, right? But it is. And I am going to, in real time, I'm going to debunk this video from PSL leader Claudia Dela Cruz, and we're going to decode it for you. And I'm going to show you the trickery and the intellectual dishonesty of this video, right? Because it's sophisticated. It's a sophisticated video, right? This is a sophisticated deception. Let's watch.
10 days, Trump will be inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. And on that day, people will take the streets all across this country to remind him and his administration that their agenda is not the people's agenda.
Well, actually, the people of America do want to stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. That is the people's agenda. The people of America do want to stop inflation. That is the people's agenda. The people of America do want to stop the degrowth economics and stop their communities from decaying. That is the people's agenda. Donald Trump won the election by a landslide because people identified far more with Donald Trump's agenda than with Kamala Harris's agenda. So right there, it's not the people's agenda. Donald Trump said he wanted to stop the war in Ukraine. Kamala Harris said she wanted to spend more money on the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump bragged about having met with Kim Jong-un and says he wants to do it again. Kamala Harris attacked him for having met with Kim Jong-un again. I'm sorry, but what people voted for Trump for, regardless of whether he does it or not, is the people's agenda. And the people voted for Trump. So right there, yes, it is.
Let's talk about it. What is Trump's agenda? Who benefits? And how do we fight it? Trump, his unelected closest advisor, Musk, and the rest of his billionaire.
Now, Elon Musk, not the best guy in a lot of ways. Not thrilled with a lot of things he said. But Elon Musk revealed that Twitter and the FBI were involved in meddling in American politics. Right? I mean, it's because Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it into X that we now know that the FBI and Twitter were coordinating who got canceled, who got smeared. And that was being coordinated between the owners of Twitter, the previous owners, and the FBI. And the reason we know that is because Elon Musk leaked the Twitter files to Matt Taibbi, to Max Blumenthal, and all of that. All right, that Twitter, we know Twitter was rigged to be a woke cancel culture machine to try and destroy people's reputations and destroy people's lives. And you'll notice that back before Elon Musk ran Twitter, loads of people, myself included, got viciously targeted on Twitter and accused of being Nazis and accused of being white supremacists. And it was generally people who took anti-imperialist stances, right? If you supported Russia and Ukraine, they called you a Nazi, they destroyed your reputation. If you didn't believe the Uyghur genocide lie, they destroyed your reputation. But there was one organization that somehow never got canceled on Twitter. And there's loads of allegations of covering up domestic violence and covering up sexual assaults against PSL. None of them ever went viral. When Twitter was not being run by Elon Musk, PSL was being protected, whereas other people that actually believe in anti-imperialism were being smeared. So she starts out by basically saying, I hate Elon Musk because Elon Musk revealed that Twitter was covering up for PSL and was helping all of PSL's honest competitors get smeared, right? She hates Elon Musk because Elon Musk revealed that Twitter was FBI controlled and was being used to smear legitimate anti-imperialists. That's why she hates Elon Musk. As bad as Elon Musk might be, Elon Musk revealed that Twitter was being manipulated to serve political agendas. And she can't stand that because, you know, Twitter, the cancel machine, the smear machine, Twitter that covered up Hunter Biden's laptop scandal at the request of the FBI. Twitter is now owned by Elon Musk, and Elon Musk revealed that the FBI was using it for political purposes.
Administration are framing their plans as a path to economic growth and efficiency.
Yeah, they think growth is bad, right? I mean, she thinks economic growth is bad, right? I mean, and it's not just her. The majority, the socialist movement in America thinks that economic growth is bad. Right? They don't think that we need socialism so we can have prolonged economic growth with a planned economy. They actually think growth is bad. Don't believe me? I'll show you one of the top socialist books. Right? I will show you. This is one of the top socialist books. Right? This book, you can find it. I bet you anything. If you go to the People's Forum in New York City, the PSL building, you will find this book on the shelf. They think economic growth is bad, right? I mean, this is one of the main socialist books now. The future is degrowth, a world beyond capitalism. They're against economic growth. So right there, she's attacking Elon Musk, not because he believes in austerity economics, not because he believes in cuts in social services, but because he believes in economic growth, because they are against growth. And Vijay Prashad, one of their main intellectuals, is a degrowther and promotes degrowth endlessly. The planet only, they are against economic growth. So right there, she's attacking Elon Musk because he believes in growth, because she is against economic growth, even though the entire reason that countries have socialist revolutions is so they can have economic growth. Stalin had 5-year economic plans. China still has 5-year economic plans. But they think growth is bad, and they want to dismantle the U.S. power grid because they think growth is just bad. And the problem with capitalism is people are growing. We don't want growth. Growth is bad. Money is bad. Anyway. Continue.
Trump is a billionaire who has historically only cared about making other billionaires more wealthy.
Right. So right there, Trump is a billionaire. Right. Listen to the use of language. Not that Trump is a capitalist. Right. It's not that Trump owns means of production and extracts profits from them. It's that Trump is a billionaire. What she's saying there is that she's not against capitalism. She's not against the economy being rationally being organized irrationally to maximize profits for a few. She is against wealth, right? Are there billionaires in China? Yes. Are there billionaires in Venezuela? Yes. Are there billionaires in Vietnam? Yes. Right? We're not against people having wealth. We're against the irrationality of the market. We're against profits in command. But she's not against profits in command. She's against wealth, right? The problem with Trump is not that he's a private capitalist and that the economy functions to maximize profits for a wealthy few. It's not property relations. It's just wealth itself, right?
The proof is in his pick for the incoming administration, which is simply a list of unqualified billionaires who will manage our collective wealth.
Okay. Who did Trump? It's just a list of unqualified billionaires. What about Tulsi Gabbard? Is she an unqualified billionaire? I don't think so. What about Kash Patel? Unqualified billionaire? I don't think so. What about Matt Gaetz, right? Matt Gaetz, who's going to be investigating the FBI as a special counsel. Unqualified billionaire? I don't think so. What about RFK, who bravely stood up to Big Pharma and exposed the vaccine mandates and the lies, and has also spoken up for proof for peace in Ukraine? I mean, no, it's all just unqualified billionaires. Right there, she's lying. She's just blatantly lying. It's like Kash Patel doesn't exist. RFK doesn't exist, right? Tulsi Gabbard doesn't exist. Matt Gaetz doesn't exist. Everyone in his administration is an unqualified billionaire, someone who's bad because they have wealth. And wealth is just inherently bad. Not because of the capitalist system and the irrationality of the market, but because wealth itself is bad, right? So right there, We're supposed to hate everybody in Trump's administration because they have wealth and for no other reason, because wealth is bad. We're supposed to be jealous of them. We're supposed to be, it's no fair. Trump is appointing people who have money and I don't have any money. And that makes me mad. I mean, that's what she's basically saying there, right? We're supposed to hate all the people in Trump's administration because they have wealth. Now, right there, that is a toxic mindset that she's putting there. She's not saying that these people are bad because of the policies they advocate. They're not saying that Trump is bad because, no, they're bad because they have wealth. Wealth is inherently bad. And she's inherently obscuring that Trump is appointing a slew of people who have stood up against the World War III drive against Russia, stood up to Big Pharma, stood up to the FBI. She's completely obscuring that. And we're just supposed to hate everyone in Trump's incoming administration because they have wealth, and wealth is inherently bad.
According to their interest. How will the Trump administration redistribute wealth from the bottom to the top, making billionaires richer?
See, redistribution of wealth, right? My whole life, I have been told that socialism is about the redistribution of wealth. It's not, right? There's redistribution of wealth in every society, right? I mean, in New York City, there are roads out there, and those roads are paid for with wealth that was redistributed from me to the taxpayer to the government to pay for the roads. They redistribute wealth to the rich people with corporate subsidies and tax breaks. They redistribute wealth to the poor with the welfare state. Redistribution of wealth goes on in every society to some degree or other. In a more laissez-faire free market model, it might not happen as much. In a welfare state like Norway or Sweden, it might happen a lot. But socialism has nothing to do with the redistribution of wealth. Socialism, according to Marx, is about overcoming the irrationality of the market. It's about changing how the means of production function, right? That's what socialism is. It's about getting rid of the anarchy of production and having a planned economy so that growth can continue. But that's not what she believes, right? She thinks Donald Trump is bad because he's going to redistribute wealth the wrong way, and her party is going to redistribute wealth the right way. And that's still just the management of the irrational capitalist system. And I got to tell you, folks, if the pie is only this big, if the pie can only ever be this big, the only way your slice can get any bigger is to cut into somebody else's slice. And getting us fighting over how the wealth is redistributed is one of the stupidest tricks. We don't want to redistribute income. We want there to be a pie that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We want no limits on human creativity. We want an ever expansion of living standards. We want to rationally organize the economy so that wealth and human growth can expand so that everyone's more wealthy than a billionaire is in our time. We are not interested in how to redistribute the wealth, but she is.
There will be defunding public services like education and housing, attacking labor protections, handing over the management of Social Security to Wall Street bankers, and allowing them to gamble with people's retirement.
It's funny because anyone who ever talked about these issues while PSL, over the last 4 or 8 years was called a class reductionist. PSL's entire group was constantly talking about people of color and feminism and LGBT. And they never talked about any of these issues. And they would call you a Nazi and a fascist if you talked about it. That's class reductionism. Anybody who talked about economic issues and didn't focus on waging a culture war against sexist, racist white males, they canceled and smeared. So suddenly they're concerned about economics. Suddenly they care about economics when they've been waging a culture war. When shut up, white man. I mean, the most woke, toxic, cancel culture organization suddenly is concerned. And they're not wrong. I'm sure it looks like if you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy, you listen to Elon Musk. Yeah, it sounds like they're engaging in austerity economics. And we've been beating the drum about it. And Jimmy Dore has been beating the drum about it. And Kim Iverson has been beating the drum about it. Little known fact, Kim Iverson really wanted to interview Claudia, the woman you're seeing on this screen, really wanted to interview her for her presidential campaign. And Kim Iverson emailed and reached out to Claudia Dela Cruz's campaign many, many times. No response. All right? It's amazing. They were running a presidential campaign, a major YouTube channel, Claudia Dela Cruz. you know, wouldn't go on there. Why? Because Kim Iverson is critical of the vaccine. Kim Iverson has defended Trump in some ways. She's not a big supporter of Trump, and she especially disagrees with him about Israel. They would not appear on Kim Iverson's show because they are so much pandering to woke cancel culture, right? Kim Iverson was willing to give Claudia Dela Cruz a platform on her YouTube channel, and she wouldn't do it because she was so worried that all the liberals might not like me. I mean, it's unbelievable. They would do an interview with The Guardian. Keep in mind, they had no problem doing an interview with the voice of British imperialism, but they wouldn't go on Kim Iverson's show because Kim Iverson is a racist. Kim Iverson is a Trump supporter. Kim Iverson is a fascist, right? I mean, this is how they are. In their liberal woke worldview, The Guardian is totally fine to be interviewed by. But Kim Iverson, oh no, she's like practically Hitler. And Kim Iverson, many times you watch Kim Iverson's show, she said, Claudia Dela Cruz, I'd love to interview her. I'd love to have her on. Claudia wouldn't be interviewed by Kim Iverson, but would be interviewed by the fucking Guardian, the voice of UK intelligence. That right there tells you what side they are on.
Medicare and Medicaid sources of profit for the insurance companies. All the things working people have fought for and advanced since the 1930s. And yes, all these achievements made possible by movements need to be made more efficient, more accessible. They need to be expanded and they need to be working better in service of the people. But handing these over to billionaires that will gamble with public funds in the name of efficiency is ludicrous. What actually needs to happen is the abolition of the billionaire class.
Bingo, right? Not the abolition of profits in command, not the abolition of the anarchy of production, the abolition of a certain amount of income. Right there. I mean, it's not about rationally organizing the economy so that wealth can expand. It's about making sure certain people don't have too much money, right? She doesn't want to abolish profits in command. She doesn't want to abolish the chaos of the market. She wants to abolish a certain income level. I mean, that's classic. Abolish billionaires. Wealth is bad.
Of billionaire rule. If we take back the wealth they have stolen from us, the working class, then we would finally have the resources.
Again, redistribution of income. That's all I'm hearing here. We take back the wealth, not rationally organize the means of production, not have 5-year economic plans, not have a state that controls the economy and organizes the economy to serve the people. If we have taxes on rich people to give stuff to poor people, right? This is exactly the stereotype of what every conservative thinks socialism and communism is, right? If we tax those who have a slightly higher income and we give the money to those who have a lesser income, that's going to solve all our problems. This is like a Rush Limbaugh caricature of what socialism is. And it doesn't occur to them not to talk that way.
To make public programs work the way they should. And
make more public programs. Yeah, that's what we need, right? And again, right? I hear this, and it's like every person who's not part of their woke cult hears more DMV, right? More DMV, more IRS. Like she's not calling for a rationally organized economy to unleash human growth and creativity. She's saying we need more government programs. Nobody who's not in their woke cult thinks that's a good thing. Americans generally hate government programs. Like again, it's not just that her understanding of what socialism is wrong. She's never argued with a conservative in her goddamn life, right? She has never argued with anyone who thinks big government is bad, anyone who thinks that, well, it's like she's on here literally calling for more government programs. Like, has she ever argued with any anti-communist ever? Of course she hasn't.
So many more programs to address the crisis.
That's what we need. Lots more government programs. That'll win the argument. Wow. Half the Trump supporters are signing up today to join your movement for more government programs.
People are facing. Trump's billionaires agenda is not a plan that is unique to Trump. Although their styles are different, the basic loyalty of both Republicans and Democrats is to the same handful of unbelievably rich people.
That's funny. That's funny because I didn't notice PSL's riot when Joe Biden got sworn in. I never saw. It's funny. Joe Biden got sworn in. I never noticed the riot. I did notice the Capitol riot of Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol. So it seems like maybe it's not exactly the same rich people. You know, I mean, if some of the rich people were rioting in the Capitol and some of them were trying to throw Trump in jail, makes me think there might have been a little bit of a difference in the ruling class. But it's all the same. It's all the same. But your group only organizes violent riots and demonstrations against one of them and condemns the violent demonstrations, against the others. Oh, okay, right. There's no difference whatsoever. You only riot against one side, and the other side, you condemn their riots and all of that. But they all just work for the same people, all just a big shell game. Oh, okay. That clears it up. Wow. Whew, thank goodness. Thank goodness there's no difference between anyone in the ruling class. And thank goodness PSL treats all billionaires the same. That makes perfect. Wow. Thanks for clearing that one up, Claudia.
Figure out how the wealthy minority can be made richer at the expense of the majority, the workers. Let's remember that Trump's election comes as a result of the inability of the Democratic Party to address people's needs and concerns.
Yeah. And you haven't responded to the Democratic Party with anywhere near the same vitriol that you responded to Donald Trump.
Not because they can't solve people's most serious problems, but because they have consistently chosen not to.
Yes, and you have consistently enabled them by being their woke protest squad. PSL actually called for longer lockdowns. Did you know this? During their election campaigns in New York City, their candidates called for more lockdowns, not lifting the lockdowns to improve the lives of working people, but longer and more lockdowns. They are a COVID fascist party. They literally called for, she is a social democrat. Stalin was right when he said social democracy is objectively the moderate wing of fascism. Yeah.
Economic hardships people face to the continued investment in genocide and war.
Wow. So which candidate was it who said he wanted to stop investing in Ukraine and stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine? That must have been Kamala Harris, right? Oh, man, right? The continued investment in war and genocide. Is her head completely up her ass? What candidate wants peace with North Korea? And what candidate wants to increase U.S. military activity in South Korea? I mean, this is,
all preventable, all avoidable. The truth is that Democrats are unwilling to listen or respond to people's needs because, like Trump and Republicans,
no, they're unwilling to respond to people's needs because of people like you, Claudia, who back them up, right? Because they say to people like you, the Republicans are the worst ones, and you go along with it, and you sheepdog the rest of us into being the foot soldiers of the Democratic Party. And so the Democratic Party doesn't have to meet people's needs, doesn't have to change, because there's always a bunch of idiots like you who say Republicans are all big fat racists. And that you're part of the game, Claudia. Everything you're saying about the Democrats, you facilitate that by pushing Trump derangement syndrome in the name of socialism, by making socialism equivalent with more DMVs and more government programs, by being the Democratic Party's woke protest squad. You are the reason that the Democrats get away with this, right? You facilitate it by saying Trump is the main danger, by aligning with the FBI and with NATO and with the Guardian and with the FBI and the Pentagon establishment against Republicans. You are the reason that Democrats can continue doing this. If you had the courage to actually say that, you know what, Trump doesn't want to continue the war in Ukraine. Trump doesn't, want the FBI to be out of control and violating our civil liberties. If you had the courage to say that, Democrats would be in a world of hurt. But people like you facilitate this illusion that the Republicans are just so evil. They're just so evil. Anyway.
They serve the dictatorship of billionaires.
Again, not capitalists, not bankers, not international monopolies, people with too much money.
In the absence of any real opposing force against the wealthiest people in society, corporations and banks, under Republicans, or Democrats. The people are left to organize our fight back against the far right and
against the far right. Who is this far right? Tell me about this far right that it's my obligation to protect the FBI from. Tell me about this big, scary far right that I have to protect the FBI from, that I have to protect NATO from, I have to protect the Pentagon from. Tell me about this far right. I want to know about this far right. You know, this is a big thing. There's this, you know, this is part of like the weird, like socialist brain damage I've been hearing my whole life. There's this big, scary thing called the right wing. And it's just so bad. And no matter how bad you think the FBI is, no matter how bad you think the Pentagon is, no matter how bad NATO is, no matter how bad the cancel culture is, there's the right wing. And it's this scary thing that's supposed to keep you, I mean, it's like the monster under your bed. The right wing. What is the right wing? People who don't believe in abortion? People who don't believe in gay marriage? I mean, what is the right wing? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, is that the AfD party in Germany that wants to pull Germany out of NATO? Is that what it is? I mean, what is the right wing? I mean, don't tell me it's white nationalists, because Richard Spencer actually endorsed Kamala Harris, and the white nationalist movement really has completely disintegrated since Charlottesville. It was never really much of anything. Don't tell me it's white nationalists. What is it? Christians, people that, you know, their religious faith causes them to disagree with some of your policies. I mean, what is this right wing? I mean, tell me about the right wing. You know, I mean, it's just this scary monster called the right wing that we always have to focus on opposing. Well, you know, this right wing wants to break apart the FBI. This right wing doesn't want World War III against Russia. This right wing doesn't want Twitter and Facebook to be able to censor us. So, you know, I'm not seeing the issue here.
That are in control of the government. We cannot allow ourselves to be distracted by the racist anti-immigrant rhetoric. The only ones robbing us from the possibility of a dignified life are the ones with the economic and political power to decide over our jobs, the price of food and housing, whether we can or cannot access healthcare or education. Now is the time to build unity across the many fronts of struggle.
Unity. Oh, you want to build unity? Is unity when you call every American who's opposed to abortion a Nazi, right? You know, PSL has been organizing protests for the past 5-6 years, saying that anyone who is opposed to abortion is a Nazi, is the same as Hitler, deserves to be killed. Go and listen to you can watch their rallies online of their pro-life group. Their pro-life organizations say that anyone who wants to outlaw abortion, anyone who doesn't believe in abortion is a white supremacist, is a neo-Nazi, violence against them is justified. So how is that for unity? Right? You know, or anyone who's opposed to gay marriage, right? Folks, Nicolas Maduro would not be allowed to join PSL, right? They claim to support Venezuela, but if Nicolas Maduro was living in the United States and applied to join PSL and said what his positions were, which is he's opposed to abortion, which is opposed to gay marriage, which he believes in state ownership and control of fossil fuels as a main way to generate revenue to build a socialist society, Nicolas Maduro, the leader of a socialist government, would not be allowed to join PSL because Nicolas Maduro is not woke, right? They do not believe in unity. They have said over and over and over again that if you don't believe in abortion, if you think abortion should be illegal, or you just don't believe in it, you don't think it's moral, you're a fascist. Not you're wrong, but you're a fascist. You're the Ku Klux Klan, you're a Nazi, and they're justified in being violent against you. They have said that if you're opposed to gay marriage, the same thing. These people, like Malcolm X, would not be able to join the PSL. Do you think Malcolm X believed in gay marriage? Do you think Malcolm X believed in abortion? Malcolm X would be denied membership in the Party of Socialism and Liberation. No, they do not believe in unity, folks. They do not believe in unity. And what they have done to the Center for Political Innovation, and to me, is absolutely reprehensible. If they believed in unity, they would be able to get along with one of the only other people in this country who loudly speaks in support of Venezuela and Iran and Cuba and countries. They can't even get along with me. All right. How many Americans are there who support Venezuela? How many Americans are there who support Iran? They can't even get along with me. Do you hear this? They claim they want unity. They can't even get along with me. The only people they want unity with are the Democrat Party. And that's why they're organizing their riot on Inauguration Day. If they can't even get along with me, one of the only Americans who defends the Houthis, who defends Iran, who defends Cuba, who defends Venezuela, someone who Nicolas Maduro has shouted out in a speech I showed you in the last stream. If they can't get along with me, how in the world do they want unity? All right, they want you. They can get along with the Guardian. They can get along with British intelligence, but they can't get along with me. They don't want unity. They do not want unity. Do not. That is the most insulting thing. These are the very people that have, spread nasty rumors and lies about me personally. I cannot go into any communist space because of scum like Claudia, right? Because of scum like her, right? Ever since, I was working at RT, I went to support the students at New School University when they were occupying their cafeteria to support the workers, the cafeteria workers in their union. And I was asked to leave. People aren't comfortable with you being here because they said that they read on the internet that you're a white nationalist. They are always spreading rumors about people, calling people Nazis, calling people white supremacists, advocating violence against people because they don't support abortion, they don't support gay marriage, spreading rumors about people's private lives and all of that. They don't want unity. Do not believe for a minute that Party for Socialism and Liberation, the liberal cancel culture, you're a Nazi if you disagree with me party, they want unity. Give me a break. They do not want unity. The only people they want unity with is Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, British intelligence, and the World Economic Forum. They don't want unity. They do not want unity. Give me a break.
Stations and communities. We can and we must build an independent movement of working class people.
An independent movement that riots when one president takes office and cheers when another one takes office. Yeah, that sounds real independent to me, right?
That is determined to fight and defeat the far right.
Got to defeat that far right, right? We can't pull out. We can't stop sending weapons to Ukraine. Oh, no. We can't have Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong-un. Got to defeat that far right, that FBI. They've got to be able to keep, running Twitter and manipulating Twitter. Got to defeat that far right, that's scary. The right wing, right? It's not about defeating imperialism. It's not about justice for working families. It's not about stopping World War III. It's about fighting the right wing. My God.
Billionaire agenda and win a whole new system. You can join the organizing meetings happening all across the country.
Unless you're against abortion, unless you're against gay marriage, unless you're in another socialist group that we don't like, unless you said something on the internet that we disagree with, unless you think for yourself and do your own reading and don't just repeat what we say. There's a lot of unlesses there. Yeah, you can join our group unless, there's a lot of unlesses there. Yeah, you can join our group. They should really be honest. No, you can't. If you have ever read Karl Marx, you're going to be treated with great suspicion because they interpret it for you. If you have any principled religious beliefs, no, you can't. But they should be honest. Most Americans could never join their group, and neither could Nicolas Maduro, neither could Malcolm X. No, the only people who can join their group are impressionable 20-year-olds that they can exploit for 2 years and get them to go out and bust their ass to organize protests that Brian Becker can fundraise off of. And then after that, they realize, wow, this group really has no plan to actually grow. This is just a group that stages liberal rallies for really only confused 20-year-olds can join your group. You should be honest about that.
The streets on January 20th. As we sound the alarm, we will not be quiet and we will not back down. We will fight for all we need and deserve.
All right. There you go. That was the voice of the people organizing the riot against Donald Trump's incoming presidency. Look, I will repeat what I have said over and over and over again. I'm not guaranteeing that Trump is going to do any good thing as president. There's no guarantees But I'm seeing some good signs, but there's no guarantees. But if Donald Trump does one good thing, we have to loudly, loudly, loudly support it. If Donald Trump continues peace talks with North Korea, we have to loudly support it. If Donald Trump is able to end this war in Ukraine, as he said he was going to do, we have to loudly, loudly support it. And if we can't very loudly support any good thing Trump might do, we can't expect any good things to happen, right? I am not pro-FBI. I am not pro-NATO. And that's why I can tell you that despite all of her tap dancing and confusion there about, oh, we're against the Democrats and the Republicans, we're against the billionaires, despite all of that, right? If you are organizing a riot against the guy the FBI didn't want to win, NATO didn't want to win, you're pretty clearly on one side. And you can tap dance around that and you can dress it up in all kinds of nice language, all you want. But actually, folks, I apologize. I get very angry because I've been dealing with these people for my entire adult life. And I have been, my patience with them has run out. But there's a more important point here. I can get angry. I can talk about how much I hate Claudia Dela Cruz and Brian Becker. And, but that's not the point, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. These people don't matter. I don't matter, right? We're all just individuals, whatever. It's not about individuals. All right. There's something bigger here that you need to understand, which is that the only way you can get good things in this world is if you put out an optimistic, positive vibe. You don't get good things in this world by being jealous. You don't get good things in this world by being angry and vengeful and wanting to punish people. You don't get good things in this world by wanting to tear things down. You get good things in this world by wanting to build and wanting to construct. You don't do anybody any favors by talking about all the poverty that exists in the world today and all the injustice and all the inequality. You do people favors by talking about the good times coming. The world is not going to hell. It's going to God. And we need to get people to understand that if we can learn to think, and if we can learn to see the reality of how our economy could be organized, we could build a much more prosperous world. Folks, probably the most popular socialist in all of American history. There's never been a socialist anywhere near as popular as this guy, Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs, the socialist presidential candidate. Eugene Debs, the popular socialist leader of the early 20th century, who was thrown in prison for opposing World War I. He gave a speech in Canton, Ohio, opposing World War I. And that speech resulted in him going to prison. And it's a beautiful, beautiful speech. And I would like to quickly review the words of Eugene Debs in that speech. Because Eugene Debs spoke in a very, very beautiful way. And there's a reason Wallace Wattles, the socialist New Thought writer who I really much inspire, he points to Eugene Debs as like the ideal voice of socialism. And Eugene Debs, this is Eugene Debs, right? This is from the anti-war speech. He's not talking about billionaires, how it's unfair, how we need to redistribute their wealth. He's not talking about the right wing. This is Eugene Debs. You need to know that it is your duty to rise above the animal plane of existence. You need to know that it is for you to know something about literature and science and art. You need to know that you are verging the edge of a great new world. You need to get in touch with your comrades and fellow workers to become conscious of your interests, your powers, and your possibilities as a class. You need to know that you belong to the great majority of mankind. You need to know that as long as you are ignorant, as long as you are indifferent, as long as you are apathetic, unorganized, and content, you will remain exactly where you are. You will be exploited, you will be degraded, and you will have to beg for a job. You will just get enough for your slavish toil to keep you in working order, and you will be looked down upon with scorn and contempt by the very parasites that live and luxuriate out of your sweat and unpaid labor. If you would be respected, you've got to begin by respecting yourself. Stand up squarely and look yourself in the face and see a man. Do not allow yourself to fall into the predicament of the poor fellow who, after he'd heard a socialist speech, concluded that he ought to be a socialist. The argument that he heard was unanswerable. Yes, he said to himself, all the speaker said was true, and I certainly ought to join the party. But after a while, he allowed his ardor to cool, and he soberly concluded that by joining the party, he might anger his boss and lose his job. I can't take that chance, he concluded, and that night he slept alone. And there was something on his conscience, and it resulted in a dreadful dream. Men always have such dreams when they betray themselves. But a socialist is free to go to bed with a clear conscience. He goes to sleep with his manhood, and he awakens and walks forth in the morning with self-respect. He is unafraid, and he can look the whole world in the face without a tremor and without a blush. That's Eugene Debs. He was not telling people to be vengeful. He was not telling people to be opposed to wealth. He was not telling people to fight for the redistribution of income. He was telling people that if we can learn to think, and if we can create a government of action that fights for working families, we can build a whole new world. A whole new world. And that's one thing I like about the Trump rallies, that soundtrack. He plays "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Rolling Stones. It's "Can't Always Get What You Want, but you find sometimes you get what you need." He plays YMCA, right? Donald Trump's inauguration, Donald Trump's rallies, they have this festive atmosphere. Donald Trump isn't telling people to be resentful. He's not telling people to want to hurt other people or how bad the world is. He's putting out a vibe of wealth and the good time coming, right? You don't help anybody by telling them all about poverty. You help them by telling them how much wealth we could have if we rationally organized the economy. You do not help anybody by telling them about how unfair the world is. Instead, you help them by telling them how much better the world could be if we could get beyond imperialism, right? You don't gain anything by telling people all about the evil things that people do and all the bigoted cruelties of this world. You tell them about how great the world could be if we could unleash human creativity and brilliance. That's how you make a better world. You don't make a better world by inciting people against each other. You make a better world by bringing people together and helping people to have kindness and empathy for each other, to understand what each other have been through, to combine their creative energy, to unleash the light within them, to shine to even brighter. That's how you make a better world. That's how you make a better world. And for the majority of my 20s and early 30s, I was putting out a negative light, right? I had a lot of resentment about my upbringing and things that went on in my youth. And I had a lot of anger and And I went out into this world and I had a lot of anger, and everything changed. In 2015, when I went to Iran, when I got on the ship, I risked my life on the way to Yemen, I had a spiritual experience. And I came back and I was not interested in tearing things down anymore. And I was not interested in calling people out and punishing people. What I wanted to do was build. I wanted to build, I wanted to construct, and I wanted to make the world a better place. And there was a poem that an old communist had recited to me years ago. And it came back to me, and I started reciting it to people. I looked up the exact words so I could memorize them, and I started reciting it to people because it incarnated what I want to be. I don't want to encourage people to be more jealous. I don't want to encourage people to tear other people down. I don't want to encourage people to be resentful. I want to help people find the light within themselves to go out and build and construct. That's what I want to do. On a busy street in a busy town, I saw them tearing a building down. With a ho-heave-ho and a lusty yell, the men swung a beam and a side wall fell. So I said to the foreman, are these men skilled, like those you might hire if you wanted to build? And the foreman just smiled and said, no, indeed. Common labor is all that I need, for I can easily wreck in a week or two that which took builders years to do. So I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who builds with care, measuring life with a compass and square? Am I living my life by a well-made plan and striving to do the best that I can? Or am I that type that scours the town, content with the labor of tearing things down? And on that note, folks, names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? Let's find out who is watching our stream tonight. Who's watching? We got Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Dusty Demo, Ryan in Kansas City. Names and locations, names and locations. BMK in New Zealand, Luca in Singapore, Jenny in Cincinnati, Ian Chester in England, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, St. David's, Bermuda, Jack Dawkins in Arizona, Alex in Brazil, Chris in Salt Lake City, Ivan in Sydney, Tom in Ontario, Doc in NYC, Ed in Louisville, Detroit, Shanty in Mexico, St. Louis, Missouri, John McCarthy in Chicago, Courtney in Virginia, Jacob in Wisconsin, Toey in Sweden, Gavin in USA, USA, Colin in Greensboro, Rio, Raphael, Gabby in Chicago, much love, Gabby, Auckland, New Zealand, Laura in San Antonio, Philip in Brooklyn, welcome, 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 Dan in the LA area, welcome, welcome, welcome. Dan in the LA area. Laura Floyd in San Antonio, Texas. London. William Kopenchuk in London. Detroit Walmart parking lot. Welcome. Northern Michigan, a better America. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Randy in Syracuse, New York. Welcome, Randy. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. All righty. Oh, Paul in the Ozarks, Ozark Mountains. My father is from the Ozark Mountain area of Missouri as well. So there we go. Chi-Town, Floor 2 Records in Chicago. Star in England. Welcome, welcome. Lockport, New York. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Leslie in the Sunshine Coast of Australia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Everybody. So, hey, my mind at this point is fully on next week, right? This event coming up next week, our Inauguration Day activities, that has my full attention at this time. It has my full attention at this time. If you're coming to DC, come to our event in Washington, DC. Good food, good music, speeches. It's going to be awesome. We'll be doing outreach throughout the day in DC, and then we're going to have a great event in Washington, DC. So I hope to see you there. I hope you can make it. If you are able to join us for the DC event, please register so that we know you're coming. That would be great. So here's the link to register. I'm dropping it in Rumble as well. Right. This is the registration link if you're able to come to our Washington, D.C. event. If you can't make it, we would really appreciate if you're able to donate to the event because it's costing us a lot of money, to put it in simple terms. So if you can, donate to our Inauguration Day activities, that would be awesome. Here's the link to the GoFundMe where you can donate to help us do our activities. Donate to our Inauguration Day activities. That would be great if you could contribute to help us with the Inauguration Day activities. Now we have one super chat and we have one Rumble rant. That is obviously not enough material for me to talk about in the second half of our show. So I would appreciate if folks could proceed to come forward with some more Rumble rants or super chats. Give me something else to talk about in the second half of the show. I do at this point think I should put some music on. So I'm going to find some music to put on. I think that would be a good thing for me to do. So we're going to take a music break. I have to figure out what music I put on. I'm thinking I might do this. So Cornelius Cardew, I might do a Cardew song, just because it's ironic. I kind of like Cornelius Cardew's music. I actually played this song for some people, that I rode to Boston with. On the way back from Boston, we were kind of entertaining each other by karaokeing and singing songs. And so because I find the Cornelius Cardew music to be the most ironic, it's just the most ironic music, that I've ever heard. I'm going to play Cornelius Cardew's Workers of Ontario, right? Especially, I think in light of the whole Trump threatening to invade Canada or wanting Canada to join the United States, it's even more ironic, I think. So, yeah, we're going to put on the Workers of Ontario, if I can get it to download. When I first heard this song, I thought it was very funny, and I appreciated it because I almost had a vision of after, in some future socialist society, some kind of Muppet singing the song Workers of Ontario by the Marxist composer Cornelius Cardew. I almost envisioned, some socialist, version of Sesame Street performing this song. So yeah, I'm downloading it right now. I don't know why it is taking so much longer than usual. But it should download very shortly. I will put on the Workers of Ontario by Cornelius Cardew, kind of an ironic socialist song, that I appreciate. I don't know why this is odd. I'm usually able to download YouTube videos and songs very easily, but it's not going too well tonight. But Yeah, let me try one more time. This is very annoying. I don't know why it's not letting me do this. But yeah, yeah, hold your horses, folks. Just trying to figure this out. Goodness gracious. I don't know why it is being annoying, but I'm trying to get it to let me download a song. And it's not doing that. Yeah, this is weird. I generally don't have a problem getting it to let me download a song, but it's now being weird. I don't know why that is the case. I'll try one more. Okay. This is very frustrating. I don't know why it's being so weird. It's not letting me download from YouTube. This is odd, right? Try one more site. Thank you for being patient, everyone. This is very, very odd. Yeah. Well, you know, I am gonna have to figure this out at another time. I see Phil in the chat is asking me to play the New China song. I will put that on. I know you all have heard New China a million times. So forgive me. I think it's a good song. It's very, very optimistic. Yeah. So tell you what, Phil, we will play New China, but first we're going to play the North Korean national anthem. So we're going to play the North Korean national anthem, which I already have downloaded. Why? Because I'm a nerd. And we got the North Korean national anthem. Then after that, we'll play New China. But please think of some super chats to ask me, and I'll answer them. But this is the North Korean national anthem, a very moving version of it, performed by a North Korean children's choir. And that was the anthem of North Korea, the country that PSL is organizing a riot to make sure we don't continue having peace talks with. That's why it fits the theme of this stream. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, that claims to support North Korea, is organizing a riot on the day that a president who promised to make peace with North Korea is going to take office. It's absolutely ridiculous. How can you claim to support North Korea and a president of the United States gets elected on the platform of making peace with North Korea, and you organize a big crazy riot against him? That's unbelievable. But anyway, we do have a couple more super chats that have come in. I do appreciate it. And it looks like a couple more Rumble rants have come in as well. However, I did promise that we would play New China for Phil. Phil is a member of our audience who's attended many CPI in real life activities and done a lot to help us with our Peace MAGA operation and other things. So for Phil, we're going to play this song, New China. Please send any more super chats that you got while we play New China. Then after we listen to this song, New China, from 1976, a song about, it's written by a group of Americans who visited China in 1976, and they came back and they wrote a song about their experience in China. Then I will answer people's questions. So here we go.
Got to the border, we began to walk under two flags flying over the bridge we were to cross. One was the bloody British rag of imperialism, casting its shadow over poverty, starvation, vicious exploitation in Hong Kong. The other was the flaming red flag of revolution and socialism, telling us all, the people of the world, the time has come to come along. This ain't just any old border that we are standing on. It stands between two systems, one dire, one young and strong. And then we crossed that bridge into China, saw a great banner up ahead. Its meaning set my heart a pounding, and this is what that banner is. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Went to a steel mill, saw people working hard, but there were no bosses. The workers ran the job. They worked 10 hours, 6 days a week, on great machines built by their own hand. They labored not for some rich man's profits, but to meet the needs of people of the land. And they are filled with such a spirit of revolution and socialism, for they are masters of their own future. The working class is in command. Talked with an older worker. He said many worries are gone. If one is sick or injured, they are provided for. We have no fear of rising prices, no unemployment will you find. There's always more to be done to build China, not just for us but to free mankind. Long live the People's Republic, long live working class rule. Long live the People's Republic, long live working class rule. start in Shanghai, where before it was free. Dope and prostitution and starving people filled the streets. And now these people stand up united, providing for the needs of all. Decent housing, healthcare, education, they decide now they are the law. And man, I felt so damn proud of China, of revolution and socialism. Just look at what our class has accomplished. Just look at what the struggle has won. We talked with men and women, now working side by side, about our many struggles for freedom so long denied. They said, comrades, China is with you. This is your country as well as ours. The struggles of the people united will be triumphant. We have the power. Long live the great unity, yeah, of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity, yeah, of the peoples of the world. No, I missed my family, wish they were there with me. I knew they're back home struggling to change society. And I admit I hated to leave China. You know that freedom kinda grows on you. But now I feel such deep determination to do the job we all have to do. Remember, people, our day's coming. Make revolution, build socialism, to do away with class exploitation, to end oppression once and for all. And I have learned a lesson that I will always heed. The fight to end oppression, the working class must lead. For we will build us up a great movement to sweep away the system we're in. And nothing gonna stop us from doing it. We will fight and we will win. Long live the people, republic. Long live working class rule. Long live the people's republic. Long live working class rule.
All righty. Well, there we go. So we have 5 super chats. And how many Rumble rants do we have? Thank you for stepping up and asking questions. You all give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. So the first Rumble rant comes from Penny Arcos, the CPI member in Minnesota who bravely confronted Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She says, Mexico just laid out a 6-year sustainable plan, Mexico, that includes public and private investment as well as public input. Scheinbaum has a 78% approval rating after 100 days. Well, I have good feelings about the current president of Mexico. I liked her predecessor. I liked AMLO. He comes out of labor union struggles. He was all about building, construction, and such. I know that he had a difficult time because the bulk of the Mexican state is tied in with America and tied in with the American deep state. But he managed to do some good things. And Claudia Sheinbaum seems to be continuing his legacy. Economic development, economic growth. Why I am in favor of that. Economic growth is good. And she has a plan in which the state cooperates with private corporations to oversee it. I'm for that. I am for that. So Penny is always keeping us updated on that issue. Now, Hempcar says, is Trump wanting to invade Greenland, Canada, and Panama because of coups in South America and Africa failing? Well, look, right? I have said that I think it's kind of dumb that Donald Trump wants to expand the territory of the United States. I don't think territorial expansion is a good thing. But I would far rather see Donald Trump fighting with Canada and Denmark than with Russia or China or Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or some anti-imperialist country. And the idea that Trump would be in some kind of confrontation with the British Commonwealth, that would push the United States further away from NATO. And we want to build the peace bridge connecting with Russia for the same reason. We want the USA to get further from NATO. So I'm not in favor of the USA going to expand into Canada or expand into Greenland. But the fact that Trump is calling for that and making Canada mad and making Greenland mad, rather than calling for being more vicious to Russia or being more vicious to China, I think is a good thing. So, I mean, that's kind of where I stand. I noticed they're already blaming Russia for the Greenland thing. They're claiming it was Russia gave Trump the idea of expanding, having the USA annex Greenland. I cannot think of a more stupid thing to claim. Why would Russia want the American military to have control of Greenland? You do realize that the Arctic is highly contested. The Arctic, the North Pole, a lot of natural gas. Russia has a claim on the Arctic. Why would they want a larger military presence in Greenland? I don't think Russia wants that, right? Russia is constantly negotiating at the UN about Arctic drilling and natural gas in the Arctic. And all. Why in the world would Russia want the U.S. military in Greenland? That is not what Russia wants. Why would Russia want the United States to make Greenland part of its territory? That idea, again, I don't think it's, I'm not for it. I don't want the USA to expand into Greenland. I don't think it's the end of the world that Donald Trump called for it, but I can guarantee you it definitely did not come from Russia. Russia does not want the United States to expand into Greenland. So the idea that somehow this is a Russian conspiracy, that takes the cake, The next thing you know, they're going to say that, that Russiagate was a Russian conspiracy. I mean, it's just like, if you don't like something, it's a Russian conspiracy. It makes no geopolitical sense for the United States, for Russia to want the USA to have a bigger military presence in Greenland. So, yeah, that takes the cake for dumb things I heard. The idea that Trump saying that was Russia's fault. That was just like, really? Now, Dahe says, U.S. historically had designs on Canada. In the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, we invaded each time with the intent on annexing Canada. And that's true. That is true. Right now, the United States is very much structured as part of the globalist imperialist system. However, as I have talked about extensively, the American Revolution was fought against the British Empire and the globalist imperialist system. And in the early years of the American Republic, our main focus was on defeating the British Empire. And we got support from the French and Napoleon to fight the British Empire. We got support from the Russians to fight the British Empire and to defeat the slaveholders, which were very much tied in with the British Empire. Russia sent its navy to the New York City harbor, and that the USA, our economy, our culture, everything about us has an Atlanticist and a continental side. Right? There are aspects of American culture that are very Anglo and very British, and aspects of the U.S. economy. The bulk of the U.S. economy, I would argue at this point, is like fully globalist and tied in with imperialism. But there is, and there always has been, a continentalist side to the United States. And the American Revolution was fought. What did the Declaration of Independence say? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what did the pursuit of happiness mean? Well, it meant the British were telling us that we weren't allowed to develop our own economy, that we had to, have the economy be impoverished, and we just had to be a holdout And we didn't want that. We wanted the 13 colonies to become prosperous economic centers. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the American Revolution was fought because there were two visions for how the 13 colonies would continue economically. And one vision was for the 13 colonies to become prosperous, industrial powerhouses. And that was Alexander Hamilton's vision, continued by Henry Charles Carey. And another vision was for them to become trading hubs for the British Empire, and just part of the British globalist system to dominate the world with sea power. And that's how it was fought. Now, the War of 1812, at that time, Canada was part of the British Empire. I mean, at this point, it's still part of the Commonwealth. It's technically an independent country, but it's part of their Commonwealth. But at that point, it was fully British territory. It was a British colony. And there was feeling that we would liberate Canada from the British Empire. Now, it's not that simple nowadays. Yes, if in the War of 1812, the USA had completely liberated Canada, that would have been a good thing. Nowadays, not so much. The USA and Canada are still part of the same global system. Trump represents a layer of industrialists that would like to pivot the USA to some degree or other further away from that, and we're trying with our call for the Peace Bridge connecting Alaska to Russia over the Bering Sea. We're trying to push reindustrialization, push, the continental economy of the United States, push the idea that we in the United States are people of the land, not people of the sea. But it's not so cut and dry anymore. But you are right, Deha. You are right in what you are saying. You are not wrong. There we go. Penny says, do you think the deep state will deal with American TikTok refugees flocking to Chinese Red Note? So, yeah, you're not the only person who's raised that with me today. Peter Coffin also pointed that out. So TikTok is about to be outlawed by the United States. It's about to become illegal. So there is a mass, what's called Red Note is exploding in popularity. It's this other app that has Chinese origins. We'll see. Let's see if they outlaw Red Note. I don't know. I have a hard time when there's a new app that opens up and I'm supposed to get on there and do it's like, it's getting to be too much, right? I do not have an Instagram because I just don't have time. I got a Facebook, I've got a Twitter, I'm on YouTube, and that's what I can handle. But I never really got into TikTok because I just didn't have time. But I don't know. I mean, the fact that it's popular and all of that. And I think in Chinese it's called Red Book. But yeah, it's called Red Note because of the little red book. It's majority in Mandarin at this point. So it's exciting for sure. And I mean, the TikTok ban is very, very stupid. It's very, very, very stupid. Let me just put it that way. It's very, 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 very stupid. And they also said that building a bakery in North St. Louis was a Russian conspiracy. Right. So there you go. That's yeah. All right. If someone asked you why you believe in God, what would you say? Well, that's an interesting question, Gavin, because would you be asking why, like what in my life caused me to do the thinking that led me to that conclusion, or what logical argument would I put forward? Right? What do you mean why? Are you asking what logical arguments I would make for the existence of God? Or are you rather asking me what is it in my life that led me? I will answer both of those questions. As far as logical arguments, the reason that I believe in God is because something cannot come out of nothing. And, obviously we have a material universe. And the material of the universe had to come from somewhere. And if there was not something preceding it, it would make absolutely no sense for the material world to just exist. How would it come into existence? It just does, right? It just does. I mean, obviously something can't come out of nothing. So even if you accept every Big Bang, all that, obviously something had to have started it. There has to be some origin to the creative energy of the universe. And the idea that it just came out of nothing, logic points to something preceding material, right? I just think the idea that all that exists in the world is material, well, that material had to come from somewhere. Where did it come from? Right? And then people say, oh, okay, well then where did the non-material forces come from? Well, the non-material forces don't have to have come from something. God doesn't have to have come from something. But material, by definition, does have to come from something. So, yeah, there you go. Something cannot come out of nothing. Yeah, I mean, that is ultimately the logical argument in favor of God's existence, and it doesn't necessarily prove Christianity, doesn't necessarily prove my religion, doesn't even prove that God is moral or just. It simply proves that the idea that all that exists is the material reality by definition had to have come from somewhere. And so that points to the existence of non-material reality. That is my logical argument. As far as what led me to come to that conclusion, I believed in God when I was growing up. When I was a child, I went to church. Everyone I knew believed in God. I don't think I ever met an atheist until I was at least a high school student. I mean, there were a couple people at my high school who very quietly told me they didn't believe in God, but almost, and I mean, there were members of my family that didn't believe in God. They didn't even tell me that really until I was in college. So it was just kind of assumed that one would believe in God growing up, and I believed in God. But then when I started reading communist literature, it was assumed that communists were atheists, and my identity got tied up with being a communist. And so communists said God didn't exist, and so follow them. And I was also, a lot of the religion that I grew up around was very, very, I don't know what the right word is, small-minded, etc. I don't know, like I told you, like there was the girl who was in the marching band with me, and she had no idea why anyone would ever believe in evolution. And I said, why don't you, what do you mean? And she said, well, there's monkeys now and they haven't turned into people, duh. So why would there be evolution? Well, the same girl who was also in my marching band. I played the trombone. So this was this girl who was also in the marching band with me. She said, I heard that some people think being gay is not a choice. And I said, well, yeah, I don't think it's a choice. And then she put her arm around the girl next to her. She said, what if I married her? Wouldn't that be a choice? And I said, do you want to marry her? And she said, no, I want to marry a boy. And I said, then you're not gay. And her eyes got very big. Oh, it never occurred to her that gay people were attracted to the same sex. She thought they were just being gay to be naughty or something like that. I mean, I don't know. A part of the conformity and the conservatism of the area I believed in was fundamentalist Christianity, and not just Christianity, but fundamentalist Christianity. The idea that the Bible is absolutely literally true, and and if you don't believe that, you go to hell. And also, people didn't have smartphones back then. People didn't, there was just this kind of not realizing that everyone in the world didn't think that way. I remember, when I was, anyway, I could tell a million stories. So because my small town was very fundamentalist and very conservative, I very much, my identity became tied in with being a communist. And so anything the communists said worked for me. I wanted to be different than the people I grew up around. But even then I remember even when I first heard about communism, I assumed that communists would want people to be more religious because they want to build a just and moral society. And I remember my mother telling me that, communism is a lot like Christianity, but it thinks you can build heaven on earth without God. And even then I felt like, I felt like God was almost the symbol of, God was like the symbol that right and wrong exist. And I wanted right and wrong to exist. I didn't just believe that right and wrong existed. I wanted them to exist. And I was quite angry with the world because even then, when I was surrounded by people giving moralistic lectures and religious, I had teachers giving religious speeches in the middle of class and, saying you would go to hell if you didn't, if you weren't a Christian in the middle of class in my public school, etc. Even then, I still had a feeling that there was a lot of people in the world who didn't think right and wrong existed. And there was a lot in the world that was very, very wrong that needed to be corrected. And so even then, there was part of me that thought, well, like, belief in God is a good thing because right and wrong, not only does it exist, but it should exist. But, communist groups, they very much, the first communist group I was around, they really pushed atheism very, very hard. The Workers' World Party that I was in, they did not push atheism very hard. They have members who believe in God, but they don't emphasize it as much, but they don't really respect you if you believe in God. There's kind of an attitude that you're not very smart if you believe in God, but it's subtle. It's not openly stated. And it really took, again, I just was tired of being angry. So much of the way I thought and so much of the way that I existed was motivated primarily by anger. And when I could let go of that anger through a spiritual experience, and I could decide I wanted to be pushing positive energy in the world, I wanted to start building light, and I was tired of the resentment, and I was tired of the fighting, and I was tired of the bitterness. That is what led me to really reconnect with my faith. So you're asking me, I gave you a logical argument, then I gave you a personal, why did I, return to that? Look, you got to let go of the bitterness. You've got to let go of the bitterness. I have had a number of people, this is true, who knew about me when they were communists and I was just a regular communist. And they knew about me. They came across me. They were in some communist group. I was in some communist group. We ran in the same circles. And then they started to really struggle with drug or alcohol addiction. And they went into recovery. And then all of a sudden, they found me again and they said, Caleb, you are exactly what I needed to hear. And that's interesting because I have very little experience with the whole world of recovery. But what drives people to addiction is often that bitterness, right? It's that hurt, that bitterness, that anger, that hurt, that feeling like the world doesn't care about you, that anger. That's what drives a lot of people to become addicts. And because of that, right, a lot of people, when they start to go into recovery, they're looking for a different message. The vibe that most communist organizations put out is this very angry vibe, this very hateful vibe, this very much resenting people vibe. I mean, you heard Claudia Dela Cruz on there, billionaires, and it's just about hating people who've got more than you. It's not about rationally organizing the economy. It's not about the imperialist system. There's these people out there who have more than you, and we got to tear them down. It's just jealousy and resentment, right? I mean, if you are trying to not be a drug addict, you need to not think that way, right? That's a cycle of bitterness that you get into. And a lot of people who've gone into recovery have said, Caleb, the way you talk matches with me. I can listen to you and I can still be an anti-imperialist. I can still be a socialist, but I don't have to feel hateful and bitter and resentful anymore. I don't have to be trying to punish everyone and show the world how unfair it's been to me. And I don't have to do that anymore. I can be a constructive, loving, optimistic person and believe in socialism. That's what you've given me. And I hope I can give that to more people. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Gavin. Hope it's helpful. I don't know. I'm just doing my best, folks. And that's all you can ever do is your best, right? And that's the thing, right? We're doing our best. We really are, right? And we're just trying to push the world in a good direction with whatever resources that we have, whatever tools and knowledge that we have. We're trying to make the world a better place, right? The reason I did this stream tonight to warn you about what PSL is planning. They are not trying to make the world a better place. They want Trump supporters to pay, and they want Americans that are against abortion to pay, and they want Americans that are against gay marriage to pay, and they want to punish the world, right? The world's been unfair to them, right? You can be sure that, well, I don't want to psychoanalyze too much, but you can be sure that the bulk of the people that are leading the Party for Socialism and Liberation very much feel that somehow the world has been unfair to them and they want the world to pay. Yeah, I mean, that's just not a good attitude. That's Kamala Harris, right? And look at Kamala Harris. I mean, that's Kamala Harris's life motivation. She wants the world to pay. That little girl was her. She wants the world to pay. And that is a deadly cycle. It is a deadly cycle that is going to lead you to an endless place of bitterness and resentment and jealousy and broken relationships and vengeance. And it's just a place you don't want to be. So there you go. Next question, next super chat, or next Rumble rant, and that's the last of the Rumble rants. It's the last of the Rumble rants here. Oh no, there's two more Rumble rants. Okay. So is Trump Israel first or what? How will he do anything worthwhile if he supports Israel in any way? Well, I agree with you, right? I'm not pro-Israel. The majority of Trump's supporters are somewhat critical of Israel, even though conservative media is overwhelmingly pro-Israel. That said, I said when I appeared with George Galloway, and I'm saying it again, I think there's a better chance of a peace deal under Trump. And it looks like there's about to be a peace deal to end the killing in Gaza. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but it looks like we're on the brink of a peace deal that apparently Netanyahu doesn't like, that's about to come out. Let's hope it comes out. But it looks like the Trump administration has negotiated some kind of deal. It's like we're being told we're hours away from some kind of announcement to end the fight, to end the onslaught against Gaza. I think that Donald Trump, look, over and over and over again, they tell us Donald Trump is so selfish. He's so selfish. Good. Because that means he's more concerned with how he can be remembered by history than being a team player for empire. And that means Donald Trump might do things. And Donald Trump has sent out a lot of mixed signals when it comes to Israel, right? Netanyahu's coming to his inauguration. So is Javier Milei. But at the same time, he's also shared social media stuff where Netanyahu is portrayed in a very negative light as a devil. He sent out some mixed signals. And listen to Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek Ramaswamy has said things like he supports Israel, but they need to protect their own borders. It's none of our business. That's interesting as well. There's mixed signals being sent out. So I don't think that to the majority of Trump supporters, America first means Israel first. That said, the bulk of what Trump says on the Israel-Palestine question is disgusting, and I disagree with it. But Trump is more of a wild card than Biden is. So, yeah, we'll see. And the last one is also from Deha. He says, more Canada. In the 1860s annexation movement in British Columbia to join the U.S., did not know that. 1940s Newfoundland and Alberta separatist movements called for joining the U.S. Did not know that, Deha. That is very, very, very interesting. I know Quebec has long tried to secede from Canada. They speak French. There was a Quebec independence movement, and there still is. I mean, there's Quebec independence from Canada. But I wasn't aware of any of this, Deha, about movements in Canadian history to join the United States. That I find very fascinating. I do know that a lot of the Canadian truckers, the trucker convoy people, wanted to join the United States and openly called for that. And that's what made me think that sections of the American deep state have wanted that for various reasons for a while. So There you go. I mean, it's been floating around, the idea of the USA invading Canada. It's been floating around certain circles for a long time. If you paid attention to the Canadian truckers, a lot of them wanted, at least, Western Canada to join with the United States. They've wanted that for a long time. And they're also Trump supporters. They're critical of the vaccine mandates, etc. There are also certain other social media personalities that will not be named here. I think you all know who I'm talking about, that have been calling for the USA to annex Canada for quite some time. Oh, thank you, Noah. Much appreciated. And many people have thought it odd of them to do that. And now that we hear this out of Trump's mouth, that's also quite interesting. And again, I think at this point, the fact that now Trump is calling for the annexation of Canada, whether he actually does it or not, it says to me that, and I don't think we're going to see like big action on that anytime soon. He's probably throwing the idea out there to maybe get the ball rolling, but something like that is going to take a really long time. But the fact that now Trump is calling for this after the Canadian trucker convoy did for so long, after certain social media personalities in our spheres that are very sketch and just kind of came out of nowhere called for it, that says to me that there's sections of the deep state that have wanted this for a long time. And those sections may be sections that are more anti-imperialist, right? Look, we got to get out of this mindset. There's the deep state and there's good guys. Now, the deep state has many different sides, okay? And there are many different agendas. And Tulsi Gabbard represents a section of the deep state that apparently is less regime change oriented. That's why we want her to run national intelligence, right? So we're not opposed. It's not, we got to get out of the mindset that it's like, oh, the whole state is bad and we're just going to do this independent thing. No, there are divisions within the ruling class, right? So strategic alliances, we want to support anyone who will move us away from World War III, move us away from the low-wage police state. So, Tulsi Gabbard, Pentagon, right? Military intelligence, whatever. Fine. We want her running director of intelligence because she's less in favor of it. You got to get out of this mindset of like, whatever. But that said, the fact that certain people who came out of nowhere to dominate certain spaces on the internet have been pushing invasion of Canada for a long time. That says something now, doesn't it? And now Trump is calling for it. And now, ding, ding, ding. Hey, hey, whatever. All right. So, anyhow, so now we're going to do super chats. So John McCarthy says, I bet the Beckers are wealthier than the Gabbards. Now that's interesting, right? So we can get into some of this. I don't know, you got to be careful making all this personal. I'm saying that to myself, John, not you. You're welcome to say what you want. I'm saying that to be careful. I'm about to say, I know a lot about this topic, but I don't know how much I should say on here about this. You might be right. I don't know the personal income of the Becker family, right? The Party of Socialism and Liberation is very much socialism in one family. So basically what happened, the way PSL came into existence, and I know this rather intimately because I was in Workers' World Party for many years, and the Party of Socialism and Liberation is a split from the Workers' World Party. In 2004, they split. The basis of the split is that Sam Marcy was the founder of Workers' World Party, and Workers' World Party has no constitution, it has no bylaws. It was just kind of a clusterfuck around Sam Marcy, right? People called them the Marcyites or the global class war tendency. And it was just kind of a collection of activists who agreed with Sam Marcy's teachings. And after Sam Marcy died, they appointed a 7-member secretariat. And it was Sam Marcy's inner circle. 7 people that would go to his house, in the 90s when he was an old man. He didn't leave his house very much. But every Monday, he would have a meeting at his house in his living room with various party members. And there were 7 members who would go to his house every Monday for meetings. And originally, it was any member of the party's national committee could attend those meetings. But then they made a rule that only these 7 people were allowed to go to the meetings at Sam Marcy's house. And they were Teresa Gutierrez, Fred Goldstein, Deirdre Griswold, Sarah Flounders, Monica Moorhead, Larry Holmes, and Brian Becker. And it was this group of 7 people, and they were the leaders of the party, and they called them the Secretariat. After Sam Marcy died, they were elected the Secretariat. So Sam Marcy died in 1998. And at that time, Workers' World Party had 2 big offices in New York City. They had the Workers' World Party office, where they ran the newspaper, and they had the party weekly forums with educational speeches. And then they had another office called the International Action Center. And it was a building. It wasn't, it was a foundation or an activist group, but it was run by Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General. And it was this anti-war, anti-imperialist activist group called the International Action Center that had a big loft where they would do anti-war protests, anti-racist protests, etc. It was like, you had the ideological office and the party office. And Sam Marcy died. After Sam Marcy died, he died in 1998, 1999, 2000. 2001, you had 9/11. And it was very clear that after 9/11, the USA was going to start invading countries. So a few days after 9/11, they launched a new anti-war activist group called ANSWER. Act Now, Stop War and Racism. ANSWER. Brian Becker and Sarah Flounders ran ANSWER because they were the 2 members of Sam Marcy's inner circle that focused on anti-war protests, right? The whole party did, but the anti-war was kind of their beat. Sarah and Brian, they focused on anti-war. Now, what was interesting about Brian was his whole family were in the party. His brother, Richard Becker, he was the leader of the California, the wing of the Workers' World Party in San Francisco. Richard Becker's wife was Gloria La Riva, and she was heavily involved in the San Francisco branch of the party, and she also frequently traveled to Cuba. And she was apparently going to Cuba quite frequently without telling the party. And she had like an independent following in Cuba that people didn't know about. She was frequently going on unauthorized trips to Cuba. They had this, it was, the California wing of the party, and was run by Richard Becker and his wife, Gloria La Riva, and Brian Becker was on the Secretariat, and he had founded this Answer Coalition. Well, as the Iraq War got going, the Answer Coalition started protesting in Washington, D.C. And they were protesting a lot, and they got into kind of a tit for tat. So the Answer Coalition was formed. Very quickly afterwards, another group called United for Peace and Justice was formed. And United for Peace and Justice was run by the Communist Party USA and DSA. And United for Peace and Justice was much broader than the Answer Coalition. And their rallies would include Democrats and stuff like that. Whereas the Answer Coalition, they would include every cause you ever heard of on the poster. U.S. out of the Philippines, U.S. out of the Korean Peninsula, legalize marijuana, free Mumia Abu-Jamal. It would be an anti-war protest, but they would include every cause you ever heard of. Whereas United for Peace and Justice would just say peace in Iraq, right? Don't invade Iraq. And United for Peace and Justice would sometimes say things like sanctions, not war. Like sanctions on Iraq are the answer, right? That was, and that United for Peace and Justice, like let the sanctions work, let the inspectors do their job. They would say things that were not anti-imperialist. Whereas the Answer Coalition, they would include every demand ever, right? So there was like a rivalry. Do we have like a far left communist demonstration that includes every communist cause ever? Or do we have very watered down demonstrations where, the Democrats can speak? Palestine was one issue, right? United for Peace and Justice generally tried to avoid the Palestine issue, or if they did, both sides did. They would say, oh, we want Israel and Palestine to negotiate, something like that. Whereas the Answer Answer rallies would say free, free Palestine, etc. Right? Answer's rallies were hard left anti-imperialist rallies. United for Peace and Justice rallies were very, very moderate, but they were bigger. They were much bigger. So Answer, they would maneuver to get permits. And that became a thing. They reserved, I believe at one point, they reserved all the permits for protests in Washington, D.C. from March 19th for the day that Iraq was invaded, March 19th, for like 20 years, right? And they would get the permits to spaces. And they were ahead of the Answer of the United for Peace and Justice in getting protest permits. And it was like this battle between Answer and United for Peace and Justice, this battle over permits. And that didn't start with the Iraq War. That goes back to the Gulf War. There was a similar fight between Leslie Kagan and the CPUSA and DSA and Workers' World. There was a fight, this is an old story, right? Of fighting over who gets to run and be the stage manager of the anti-war protest in Washington, D.C. Well, Answer, that became Brian Becker's obsession, and he was very good at it. And he met a woman who ran a law firm that was very, very good at suing the government, suing Washington, D.C. for denying permits. And if I'm not mistaken, he married that woman, right? And that woman was very, very good at suing, right? So if they deny the permit, you sue them, and then the government has to pay you thousands of dollars because they violated your free speech by denying you the permit, right? And so Brian married this woman who was a lawyer who's very, very good at suing to get permits. None of this is scandalous, I don't think. This is fine, right? Whatever. So Brian was running the Answer Coalition, and he was, he'd found a way to kind of monetize getting the permits for protests, suing if you didn't get the permits, negotiating, selling I believe, if I'm not mistaken, selling the permits to other people, right? Like you reserve the permits, but then you buy the permit from them once they've reserved it. Games like that. And Brian figured out a lot of ways to bring in money, right? And Brian was always much more ambitious than the rest of the Workers' World Party. And so as the Answer Coalition was bringing in all this money and all of that, he just said, fuck it. Why do I have to listen to Deirdre Griswold and Fred Goldstein and these other people? I can just start my own group. I don't honestly blame him for that. That's where Party for Socialism and Liberation came from. So that said, is Brian personally quite wealthy? I can't speak to that. My understanding is he's married to this lawyer who's very good at suing the government and gets very big legal settlements from the government for denying permits. So that leads me to believe that, you said, I bet the Beckers are wealthier than the Gabbards. No comment. I can't speak to that, but honestly, that might be true. I don't know, right? And at the end of the day, I'm not against wealth. What I'm against is the fact that they are keeping anti-war sentiment attached to the Democrat Party. And the way they conducted themselves in response to the Rage Against the War Machine rally called by the People's Party and the Libertarian Party was absolutely reprehensible. This rally, because it included, look, at this point, the majority of Americans that are anti-war are not leftists, and the majority of leftists are not anti-war. There's no way around that. The majority of leftists want more funding and weapons to Ukraine. And the majority of people who don't want more weapons and funding to Ukraine are not leftists. So if we're going to have a serious anti-war movement in America, it needs to change, right? Whether you like that or not, the reality is, look, if the majority of Americans who were anti-abortion were leftists, the anti-abortion movement would have to become a leftist movement. If the majority of Americans that were in favor of the Second Amendment were Buddhists, the Second Amendment rallies would start to be Buddhist, right? That's just how these things work, right? So right now, the majority of Americans who have a non-interventionist, don't send weapons and funding overseas perspective are not socialists and communists. They are either libertarians or they are conservatives. That's a fact, okay? And You can say they're wrong. You can say a lot of things, okay? And I might agree with some of the things that you say, right? I have a generally socialistic economic view, but I'm telling you, if the majority of anti-war people are not socialists, the anti-war movement is not going to be socialist dominated. Brian Becker is determined to make sure that doesn't happen. And the way they responded to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, calling it white supremacist, that's a call for the government to suppress it. That's what that is, right? That if you call someone a Nazi, right, in especially in the Workers' World Party, right? Sam Marcy wrote a book, Klan and Government, Foes or Allies, that basically says they believe in the right of armed self-defense and violence against fascists. Now, if you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan that goes out and lynch people, do people have the right to fight back against lynchers? Absolutely. You're talking about neo-Nazis that commit hate crimes. Do people have the right to fight back and engage in armed self-defense against them? Yes. But the Party of Socialism and Liberation has changed that, right? When Sam Marcy wrote his book and took that position, advocating violent self-defense, he was talking about people defending themselves against people who want to kill them. PSL says that anyone who's against abortion is a fascist. They say that anyone who's against gay marriage is a fascist. Anyone who voted for Trump is a fascist. So basically, PSL thinks, when they were calling this big anti-war rally in Washington, D.C., that Dennis Kucinich spoke at, that Chris Hedges spoke at, Garland Nixon spoke at, when they called it a fascist rally, they were basically saying they wanted everyone there to be killed. Now, that's not a defensible position, and they would back away from that. I'm sure if you confronted them with that, they'd say, oh, no, we didn't say that. But that's actually what they think, right? Because if fascists, violence is justified against them, if you call a whole rally fascist, that's what you're saying. So the way that they responded and claimed that a rally that had Cynthia McKinney at it, that it was utterly reprehensible. Why did they respond so viciously to the Rage Against the War Machine rally? Why? Because they're losing their monopoly. That's why, right? They're losing their ability to dominate the protest space. They're terrified that they'll lose their cash cow. The whole reason PSL exists is because they are king of the protest cage. And the Libertarian Party and the People's Party organizing a rally that wasn't controlled by them points to them not being king of the protest cage. Really, you have to think about it like corrupt labor union bosses, right? Corrupt labor union bosses, they are not so much concerned with the victory of the working class as they are with keeping their position as the corrupt union boss. That's what PSL is. They don't really care about opposing imperialism. They care about maintaining their position as the corrupt bosses of the anti-war movement, right? That's what the problem is. They are basically the equivalent of corrupt union bosses, except they run anti-war protests. And they run communism, right? And they don't really care. They look, at this point, living standards in the USA are dramatically going down. Americans are angry at the government. There's no reason we shouldn't have a mass anti-imperialist movement in this country right now. But they would never want that to happen because they wouldn't be the corrupt bosses in charge of it. And that's why they're doing everything they can to promote cancel culture, to promote wokeification, to promote all this stuff. Because if a real anti-imperialist movement were to actually spread, they would lose their position of being the boss of this tiny, irrelevant anti-war movement. The last thing Brian Becker would ever want would be for people all across America to start protesting against the war, right? A real movement. If all the Americans who don't want money to go to Ukraine started marching and protesting, he would lose his position because the majority of the people in America who are against sending weapons to Ukraine are not woke. And in order to be part of Brian Becker's protest club, you have to be woke, right? And so, he is far more afraid of a real anti-war movement than he ever would be of losing losing his, I mean, he wants to be the boss. That's the problem. They're basically the equivalent of corrupt union bosses. Next question is, are PSL's errors a product of Sam Marcy's weaknesses or a betrayal of his mission? Both. They're both. And if you really want an answer to that, shameless plug, you just got to read this book, Out of the Movement to the Masses. Chapter 2 of this book is called Sam Marcy and the Global Class War Tendency. And you will learn all about all of this. On the one hand, it's a betrayal of Sam Marcy's teachings because Sam Marcy was very much economic and populist in his orientation. There's a beautiful letter. One of the best pieces of writing that I have pointed to many, many times. Sam Marcy, 1991, Sam Marcy's in his 70s. David Duke was running for governor of Louisiana. And Sam Marcy wrote this letter to the workers of Louisiana, urging them not to vote for David Duke. And if you read this letter, I mean, this letter would get you expelled from any communist group today. This letter is very, very well written. And it says, first of all, that your employer has no right to tell you not to vote for David Duke. And it's understandable that you might want to vote for David Duke because you're mad at the conditions of the state. And it makes a very class-conscious, anti-capitalist appeal to the workers of Louisiana who would vote for David Duke, saying, I understand why you might want to vote for David Duke, but racism isn't the answer. And it's beautiful. And if anybody joined the Workers' World Party or joined the PSL today and spoke this way, they would not just be expelled, they would be crucified first, right? But this letter is very carefully written, explaining that the establishment that is anti-David Duke is what working class people are mad at. And they have every right to be mad at that establishment. But David Duke's racism isn't the answer. Beautiful. This Sam Marcy, right? I mean, this Sam Marcy would be horrified with how PSL conducts itself right now. And so to say that PSL or even the modern Workers' World Party is a fair interpretation of Sam Marcy's legacy is incorrect. Go read this letter. Go and read this letter to the workers of Louisiana, urging them not to vote for David Duke. Both parties, PSL and Workers' World, are so consumed with cancel culture, are so consumed with anti-working class hate, right? They are parties of wealthy New Englanders, wealthy New Yorkers, wealthy California rich kids that tokenize ethnic minorities and look down on the bulk of the population. And they would never even think of writing a letter like this, right? Sam Marcy is urging workers of Louisiana who might consider to vote for David Duke not to, by making class arguments against them, right? Whereas PSL thinks any person who would ever consider voting for David Duke is fascist scum who we're going to kill, and they're Nazis, they're racist, no compromise with racism, yeah! That's what they think, okay? So you can't blame the way PSL acts completely on Sam Marcy. That said, there was a side of Sam Marcy that was like that. For example, Sam Marcy was not born in the United States. He was born in Ukraine when Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. Sam Marcy's family fled to the United States because of anti-Semitism. Sam Marcy was Jewish. He lived in a Jewish village in Ukraine. Back then, Jews in the Russian Empire were segregated. And the Red Army protected his Jewish village from the White Army. The White Army was very anti-Semitic and would murder Jews, and the Red Army would protect them. And his first memory in childhood is the Red Army soldiers coming to protect his village from the White Army. So Sam Marcy, he was a Jewish guy. And after the Russian Revolution, his family, they were protected by the Red Army. And that's what basically won his loyalty to communism for his whole life. He moved to New York City. His father moved to New York City. And then his mother and his brothers moved to New York City a couple years later. He lived in New York City, and in New York City, he was in Brooklyn, and he joined the Communist Party. In 1928, the Communist Party moved its headquarters from New York City to Chicago. That was a good thing because New York City is not like the rest of America. New York City is very cosmopolitan, etc. It's a lot more like Europe. Chicago was an industrial city, not a Wall Street finance city, but an industrial city in the heartland of America, in Illinois. That was correct, right? And that was Stalin. Stalin was rejecting Trotsky and his theory of permanent revolution, which is globalist. And he was saying socialism in one country, Eurasianism, we're going to have, socialism in the heartland. So Stalin had the headquarters moved to Chicago. Well, Sam Marcy says that was wrong. He said that was, quote, pandering to reaction. He thought Chicago was reactionary and white and not immigrant, and that New York City was more, quote, multinational. So he thought it was a bad thing that Stalin moved the headquarters to Chicago. Well, that's fucked up. That's wrong. So he was a little off. That's like the first sign that something's a little off right there. Right? Sam Marcy hated and was very bitter about the fact that when he was in the Communist Party, they basically told him he wasn't going to be the main public spokesperson because they wanted to appear, quote, more American. And it's true. The majority of the Communist Party's membership was not English speaking at this time. They were speaking Russian, Lithuanian, Yiddish, whatever. The majority of the Communist Party's membership was not born in America, and they had a lot of black members who were born in America but were African American. But during these years, the Communist Party bent over backwards to find white dudes who were born in America to lead them. And during the 1930s, the Communist Party was led by William Z. Foster, who was an Irish Catholic from Philadelphia, and Earl Browder, who was a farmer from Kansas. Was an English Anglo farmer from Kansas. Well, why? Because the Communist Party was always accused of being Russian agents, of being a foreign organization, and they wanted to show that they were fighting to represent the majority of the American people. So Stalin said, don't put some Jewish guy born in Ukraine who has a thick Russian accent in charge of the party. Put Earl Browder, put William Z. Foster in charge of the party. Well, Sam Marcy didn't like that. He said that, well, I mean, do you blame him? I mean, he was discriminated against for being Jewish, for being foreign born, for not having English be his first language. He was discriminated against. Well, I mean, that sucked for Sam Marcy. I can sympathize with him to some degree. But in his mind, the idea of appealing to, at that point, which nowadays, to be fair, nowadays that's not as big of a majority. But in the 1930s, the overwhelming majority of Americans were white Christians, okay, that were born in this country. Now, it's a lot different now. The country is a lot different. The demographics have really changed. But back then, it was very different. Minneapolis, there's a recording of Farrell Dobbs, who was a leader of the Teamsters strike in Minneapolis. And someone asks him, your writings on the Teamsters strike in Minneapolis, you never talk about the role of black workers in that strike. And Farrell Dobbs got up and he said, that's because there wasn't any. And he said, you don't understand. Back in the 1920s and 30s, if you lived in Minnesota, you could live your entire life and never meet a black person. Now that sounds crazy to us right now, but that's kind of how segregated the country was. And that in Minneapolis in 1934, the role of black workers in the Teamsters strike was very, very small, right? It was very, very minimal. And that, the great migration of black people to the northern urban centers had not really taken off to the point, and yeah, there were a lot of, America was super, super white back then. Okay. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's not a good thing, right? Segregation is not a good thing, right? People of different races and backgrounds and people of different nationalities and religions living together is a good thing. But the reality is that in the 1920s and 30s, the country was overwhelmingly white. and overwhelmingly people born here. And the Communist Party was constantly being accused of being a party of foreigners. So it makes sense that Stalin would tell them, move your headquarters from New York to Chicago and find a couple white dudes to lead you so that people can see that there's room for white dudes in your party and that you're not a foreign conspiracy. Sam Marcy was very bitter about that. And he very much went in the exact opposite direction. And this is actually a very common thing in American politics, right? We go one way and we overdo it, and then we go another way and we overdo it. Another thing that happens in politics, this is a very common thing, especially in communist politics, is, and this is a really common thing, right? And this happens in communist groups in particular. And I don't know, it may happen in other organizations and other political movements, but the leader says, right? He just says one thing. Stalin says, it'd be nice if, you probably should find a guy to lead your group who's kind of American, right? Who's kind of, looks like the bulk of the American population. Probably, Stalin says, just a passing comment. And then the lower rank says, we must, and then, so Stalin says this, and then Stalin's underlings say this. And then by the time it gets to America, it's like this. And that happens a lot, right? That a leader will say a mild thing, and then the lower rank, they're all sucking up to the leader. So they blow it up, and then their followers blow it up even bigger. And by the time the policy is carried out, what started out as a passing comment becomes like an insane, unquestionable obsession, right? And I mean, this happens, right? Trotsky is a great example of this. Trotsky, right? He said that by calling the Social Democrats in Germany social fascists, the communists in Germany didn't have the unity with the Social Democrats they needed to defeat Hitler. That might be true. I don't know. Trotskyists say it's Stalin's fault that Hitler came to power. And now I hear on the internet from Trotskyists all the time, Stalin and Hitler were allies. The German Communist Party and the Nazis worked together to kill the... And it's like, that's not what Trotsky said. Trotsky said, gee, their policy of calling them social democrats didn't work out. But they take something that was said and they blow it up and they blow it up and they blow it up. So this policy that Stalin had makes sense, right? It's very possible that by the time that policy was put in place in America, it was nuts, right? And that, yes, during the late 1930s, 1938, 39, the Communist Party, they got to be a little bit cringe and they got a little over the top with the Americanism stuff, right? That, every meeting began with the Pledge of Allegiance and, they were really, really overdoing the American stuff to the point it was almost like, a little bit like, methinks the lady doth protest too much. Like, okay, we get it. You guys are patriots. Yes, you're patriot. Okay, we got, yes, you're super American. I am all for socialist patriotism, but they really amped it up, right? And so, to be fair, right, he may have had a little bit of a point. Regardless, he went in the opposite direction. And Sam Marcy, some of it is very, very admirable, right? First of all, Sam Marcy was Jewish, but he was not a Zionist. He was definitely not a Zionist. And Sam Marcy prided himself on how much of a non-Zionist he was. And that's very, 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 very admirable. Especially someone who experienced great persecution for being Jewish and all of that. And he admired black nationalists. He took the position that black nationalism was good because it was fucking up American imperialism. The story that I heard was that there was a Trot who was arguing with him one time. He was handing out leaflets at a demonstration, and a Trotskyite said to him, how do you know that black people are a nation? And, what makes you think that black people are a nation? They speak the same language as a white guy. How do you know black people are a nation? And he took off his hat. He was bald at the time. And he said, look, if in America, bald people wanted to call themselves a nation, I would support it because that would weaken American imperialism. So I don't care. I'm not interested in whether black people have the checklist of being a nation. I would support any group in America that it wants to call itself a nation and separate and break apart the United States, because that's what it means to be an anti-imperialist, right? And so he said, look, if bald heads wanted to be a nation, I would support that. And that was kind of his position. And so black nationalism, he supported it, to the point that, when Minister Farrakhan was accused of anti-Semitism, he wrote, and I wish I could find this, I found it, a centerfold, why Jews should support Farrakhan. And it was like this big, long article about why, sure, Farrakhan may have said things about the Jews that we don't like, but Farrakhan is a black person who is leading black people to fight American imperialism, and so you should support that. It doesn't matter. Apparently, there was a group of Kenyan liberation fighters who aligned with Hitler during World War II because they hated the British Empire. They were not communists, obviously, and they were Kenyan, Africans who were fighting the British Empire, and Hitler was fighting the British Empire, so they teamed up with them. Sam Marcy apparently wrote big articles defending their right to do that, saying that black Africans who are fighting the British Empire had the right to get guns from Hitler and get funding from Hitler. And apparently there was a photograph of Hitler shaking hands with a Kenyan liberation fighter. And he apparently had that picture and showed it to people. Look at this, right? And we support this, because any black person has the right to get support from anybody to fight imperialism. And that's good, actually. That's very admirable that he went to such extreme lengths to be an anti-imperialist. That's very admirable. But it leads to a kind of you get into this place where it's like, are you fighting against American imperialism, or are you just kind of being a wrecker? You're just fighting against the country you live in, right? And that, it got to the point where, again, the bulk of the population post World War II, living standards in the USA were very high. The idea of building populist workers movements in the 70s, the new communist movement really tried that and it didn't work. And so you have this idea of we're the persecuted few, right? We're the good Americans who are anti-imperialists, who support the black people, who support the colonized people around the world. And we're the good Americans, and all the other Americans are the sheep, and we're the good people. There's kind of a martyr complex that you get where, so, as much as Sam Marcy did argue against the Weathermen and their position of the American people are bought off, and he vehemently argued against the position that the white working class were labor aristocrats and stuff. There was still this mindset of we're so good because we're against the American people, and we support any movement that's going to fuck shit up over here. And there's a wrecker side to that. Okay. And it kind of goes against, it almost cancels out everything he wrote in that beautiful letter to the workers of Louisiana, urging them not to vote for David Duke. But it's there's a contradictory aspect to Marxism, right? There is. Sam Marcy, on the one hand, he knew that to be a real Marxist, you had to be a populist. On the other hand, he himself was from a minority background. He was a Jewish, foreign-born guy. And he had an alienation from the bulk of the American population. It's contradictory. And being a revolutionary is a contradictory thing. And so I don't know. This is a long answer to your question, John. I've spent a long time thinking about this. Go and read chapter 2 of Out of the Movement to the Masses. And you'll get kind of an understanding there. But the roots of PSL's problems are in Sam Marcy. But Sam Marcy would never have been allowed to join PSL. If you go and read the letter he wrote to the workers of Louisiana, they'd never allow any of that in their group. Several channels that I have put out hits on Tulsi using Jacobin as a source. Obvious to me, her FISA flip-flop is about getting confirmed. Thoughts? Look, I'm not telling you that Tulsi Gabbard is some great anti-imperialist. I'm telling you that she's less in favor of war. She's more in favor of negotiating with Russia. She represents a faction of the deep state that has a different agenda, and we're not trying to tell people that, that these people are all great anti-imperialists. I will say Jacobin is a Zionist controlled entity. Its primary funder is the Jewish Communal Fund, which is a pro-Israel foundation that organizes trips to Israel that are like the liberal trips. The main hard right-wing Zionist trips to Israel are called Birthright, but like the liberal alternative to Birthright is called, I forget what it's called, but it's paid for by the Jewish Communal Fund. The Jewish Communal Fund funds Jacobin, and Jacobin is conveniently on the wrong side of every issue. They've denounced Venezuela, and that they try to be edgy. They try to write stuff that sounds edgy. They don't want to be known as moderates, but at the same time, you know, they are not anti-imperialists, and they are State Department socialists. So, Jacobin is basically partisan review 2.0. And the hit piece they did on Tulsi Gabbard was rather selective, because there's plenty of liberals that they would advocate voting for as an alternative to Trump who believe the same things that they, bait her. Oh, she believes in drones. Obama believed in drones. Kamala Harris believed in drones. Bernie Sanders, drones are literally made in Vermont, right? The drones are directed from a military base in Vermont that Bernie Sanders helped set up. So, it's like, yes, did Tulsi Gabbard believe in drones? Yeah. Is that good? Do I believe in drones? No. But is that like, it's inconsistent. And the way they baited Tulsi Gabbard, she's a fascist, she's a Nazi, she supports Assad. It's, they are a pro-imperialist outlet, and they are very much tied in. Actually, that's some of the good work that has been done by Gray Zone, is they've shown, Jacobin conferences, it's like the CIA people in every country. The people trying to overthrow Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, they're speaking. The people trying to overthrow Assad in Syria are speaking. It's like Jacobin conferences are like collections of CIA agents from all over the world that are trying to overthrow anti-imperialist governments in the name of, rainbow flags and woke politics. There you go. All right. A while ago, you spoke about a leader in Israel before Bibi that was pro-Hitler. Can you iterate on that? Well, it was, okay. All right. So prior to Israel's creation, there were two armed groups in the British Mandate of Palestine that were Zionist. The first was called Haganah, and that was the Israeli Labor Party, the armed wing of the Israeli Labor Party. And they were pro-British, and they were anti-Nazi. And they called themselves social democrats. They wanted Israel to be a socialist country. They were not Marxists or communists. They were not Marxist-Leninists. They were like social democrat, laborites. There's another faction called Irgun, and they were the revisionist Zionists, right? So Zionism, you had regular Zionism, which is the World Zionist Organization, that aligned itself with social democracy and with the British Empire. There was a breakaway from the Zionist movement called the revisionist Zionist movement. And the armed wing of that was called Irgun. And Irgun supported the Axis powers during World War II because they thought Hitler would cause Jews to flee to Palestine. They argued that Jews could never be integrated into Europe, and that it was better if Hitler and Mussolini won, because then all the Jews would flee and they would have to move to Palestine. They were a minority among Zionists. Most Zionists were social democrats that were aligned with the Labor Party. But Irgun and the Revisionist Party were the opposite. And there are, you can read about some of the founders of the Revisionist Party, some of the founders of Irgun, made statements blatantly celebrating Hitler coming to power, made statements saying things to the effect of what Mussolini is for the Italians, what Hitler is for the Germans, that's what we want to be for the Jews. They embraced right-wing nationalism as opposed to social democracy. The mainstream current of Zionism was social democracy, but the minority and more radical current was right-wing nationalists. So there you go. All right. Please talk about Eurocommunism, the elimination of Marxist theory from social democracy, and the adoption of neoliberal policies by the European left. Okay, well, so all right, this is like a timeline. All right, so the movement that Karl Marx started, in his lifetime, it called itself communism. There was the first the International Working Men's Association, but it didn't work out too well because Marx and Bakunin and the anarchists didn't get along. And ultimately, the First International fell apart. Marx died. Around the time that Marx was dying, a party was started in Germany called the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Germany, or the SDP. And the German Social Democratic Party eventually laid the foundations of a network of political parties across Europe that was called the Second International. And those parties used the term social democracy to describe themselves. What the movement that Marx created is basically social democracy. Friedrich Engels and Marx himself were key in kind of helping lay the foundations for the German Social Democratic Party. There's a pamphlet by Marx called Critique of the Goethe Program. And that pamphlet is about the founding of the German Social Democratic Party in Goethe, Germany. And the German Social Democratic Party, and eventually the British Labour Party, eventually various French parties, the Austrian Social Democratic Party, all these parties, they were organized into the Second International, and they were called Social Democrats. Marxism in Europe used the name social democracy because they didn't want to be confused with the violent anarchists that Marx had fought with. Okay, social democracy gradually became more and more reformist. And basically, social democracy was not anti-imperialist. Capitalism was moving into the stage of imperialism, and the Social Democrats were not really against imperialism. Okay? And there was Bernstein who came forward and said, the movement is everything, the goal is nothing, that capitalism in the West is just kind of turning into socialism. And he was the founder of the revisionist school of Marxism. But even mainstream social democracy, Karl Kautsky was the big Marxist intellectual prior to World War I. Prior to World War I, nobody knew who Lenin was. If you'd said Lenin, people were like, who's that? People knew Karl Kautsky. The Mr. Communism or Mr. Social Democracy was this German guy named Karl Kautsky. And Karl Kautsky and German social democracy became less and less revolutionary and more in favor of imperialism. And when World War I broke out, the Social Democrats all supported their governments in World War I. And at that point, social democracy was pretty bankrupt. And then when World War I came to an end, the government of Germany collapsed. And the Social Democrats, the unions, basically took power. And the Social Democrats took power, and they became the government, and they met in Weimar, and they wrote a capitalist constitution, and then they teamed up with the Freikorps, these right-wing officer militias, to kill all the communists who wanted to have an actual socialist revolution. So European, what you can call social democracy became very blatantly anti-communist, very much pro-European imperialism, and against the Russian Revolution, and they didn't advocate. A revolution happened in Germany, and they crushed it. So that's social democracy, and they created what was called the Second International, and there's something called the Socialist International that DSA was part of at one point, and not anymore. The Socialist International, the British Labour Party, the Australian Labour Party, various social democratic labor parties from around the world are organized into the Second International. It's called social democracy. Now, social democrats, what they believe is that capitalism kind of gradually turns into socialism. That one day we have, that their argument is there's no revolution, right? That one step at a time, the Western capitalist societies become more and more socialist, right? And we have universal suffrage. Everyone can vote, and there's more workers than capitalists. And first we have public education, and it's like, and I've actually seen like presentations where they make this argument. It's the idea is that socialism is like a wall, and that one brick is free healthcare, and one brick is free education, another brick is the right to go on strike at your job, and all these bricks will eventually add up, and socialism is just the sum of reforms. There's no revolution. Western capitalism just kind of naturally, step by step, becomes more and more liberal and more progressive, and eventually we have socialism. And the Western countries are the most advanced. So, the Western capitalist countries are the closest to socialism of any country in the world. And that communist governments they're not socialist at all. They're third world brutal dictatorships, and overthrowing them is a great thing because it will help them become more like the West, which is the furthest along the road to socialism. That's social democracy. Now, the thing is, social democrats, right? And you're talking about, the adoption of neoliberal policies by the European left. Social democrats always believed they wanted a state-run economy, but they thought they would build it gradually, right? In Norway, they had at one point in the 1930s, I think even up into the 1960s in Norway, if you worked in a factory, you got your paycheck, and out of your paycheck came your taxes, but then you paid a separate tax that went into a special fund created by the Norwegian government so that someday the workers in your factory could buy the factory from the boss. And and they were setting aside a little piece of your wages for this fund. So eventually you would buy the factory from your employer and it would be owned by the workers. And that social democrats believed that eventually we would have a society where the means of production were controlled by the working class and the economy was not functioning according to profits, but you would build it step by step gradually. That's what they believed. And in Britain, that was called Clause 4, right? In the British Labour Party and their bylaws, they had the infamous Clause 4 that said eventually they would have a socialist society in Britain. It's called Clause 4, right? And you can read it. It's got a Wikipedia page, and it was in the Labour Party's constitution. Clause 4 said, I'll read it to you. This was the British Labour Party, which has always been an imperialist party, but at least on paper, they did say, this is what Clause 4 said, to secure for the workers by hand and by brain the fruits of their industry and the most equitable distribution thereof that may be possible on the basis of common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange, and the best obtainable system of popular administration and control of industry or service. That's what it said, right? And that was Clause 4, right? And that was, and it used to be on your membership card. And the British Labour Party was written those words, right? That we eventually want public ownership of the means of production. However, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the various European social democratic parties, the Labour Party in Britain, the French Socialist Party, the German Social Democratic Party, they stopped advocating a planned economy. And they started believing in, privatizations. And so now, Clause 4 of the British Labour Party's constitution says something completely different. In 1995, Tony Blair changed it, and it says, now, the Labour Party is a democratic socialist party. It believes that by the strength of our common endeavor, we achieve more than we achieve alone, so as to create for each of us the means to realize our true potential, and for all of us, community in which power, wealth, and opportunity are in the hands of the many, not the few, where the rights we enjoy reflect the duties we owe, where we live together freely in a spirit of solidarity, tolerance, and respect. Now, that's what Clause 4 says. Now, you'll notice it does not call for common ownership of the means of production, right? It instead just says, we want equal opportunity, basically. We want equal opportunity, tolerance, and respect. So they know they're not really social democrats anymore, because social democracy, this movement started by Marx, they watered it down, but at least they did technically want to achieve socialism, a planned economy, the elimination of capitalism. Now the social democrats are not even really social democrats anymore. They're just kind of they're advocates of solidarity, tolerance, and respect, opportunity for everybody. A bunch of nothing, a bunch of liberal hogwash, right? So, social democracy is not social democracy anymore. Now, Eurocommunism. What is Eurocommunism? Eurocommunism is in 1978. The Italian Communist Party, the Spanish Communist Party, and the French Communist Party gathered and denounced the Soviet Union. And they said that even though we were founded to support the Russian Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution, and even though, we are Marxist-Leninist parties, we don't like the Soviet Union. We don't support Soviet foreign policy. We think the Soviet Union violates human rights. They denounced the Soviet Union. That's what Eurocommunism is. And a number of communist parties around the world followed their lead. The Japanese Communist Party, and a number, and that in a lot of countries today, you have a very large communist party that doesn't really believe in communism anymore. That starting in 1978 denounced the Soviet Union and became more or less social democratic. I mean, they want to eventually build a socialist society, but they're against all the anti-imperialist governments, and they support the imperialists against them, right? And that's what social democracy, that's Eurocommunism. And the French Communist Party comes out of that tradition. The Spanish Communist Party comes out of that tradition. And a lot of those parties just liquidated after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Italian Communist Party stopped being, they called themselves the Democrat Party of the Left, and they stopped being communist. The British Communist Party liquidated after the fall of the Soviet Union. So, that's Eurocommunism. Eurocommunism was a trend starting in 1978 of communist parties breaking their ties with the Soviet Union, and aligning with U.S. imperialism against the Soviet Union, while still claiming that they hold on to their Marxist-Leninist principles. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, we're talking about a various series of things. Much appreciated, Noah. Thank you for your super chat. And it was great to see you in Boston. You're a good guy. I can't wait to see you in DC. All right. Your thoughts on war in the South China Sea. Look, the issue in the South China Sea is that China has, at this point, the world's largest industrial production apparatus. However, in order to run it, they need oil. And they can get a lot of oil from Russia, and they can get oil from different places, but a lot of that oil comes on oil tankers in the South China Sea. The USA wants to have the oil veto over China's economy. They want to, at some point, if the USA is mad at China, to be able to erect a naval blockade and cut off the oil supply to China, which would lead to like the lights going out and China, big sections of China not having electricity, and China's economy would come to a grinding halt if the oil tankers in the South China Sea stopped. The U.S. government knows that. And so they have increasingly put the U.S. military in the South China Sea, basically saying to China, if you do something wrong, we will erect a naval blockade and no oil tankers get through and your economy freezes. And China is saying, no way in hell are we going to let you threaten that. So they are increasingly putting their military in the South China Sea, saying, hey, America, if you try to block oil tankers from coming into China, we'll bust a cap in your ass. We'll blow you away, motherfucker. So don't even try. I'm using colorful language. But basically China heavily militarizes the South China Sea to make sure those oil tankers keep coming. The United States increasingly militarizes the South China Sea because they want to be able to threaten China and say they don't do it. Now, who's caught in the middle? Well, there's an island that Vietnam says belongs to Vietnam and China says belongs to China. And I think the Philippines also claims that island. It's contested. Taiwan technically is part of China, but it has a separate government. The island of Taiwan is called the Republic of China, but it has the old, Chiang Kai-shek government. It doesn't recognize the government on the mainland. And the South China Sea, there's competing interests, right? The Philippines has fishing rights, right? They do the fishing, right? And they make a lot of money by pulling fish out of the South China Sea. And with China putting all their military in the water, that often makes it a little uncomfortable for Filipino fishers, because they're fishing and then there's a big Chinese military ship and that causes them some problems. And Vietnam, they want the island and there's issues there. But ultimately, it's about China making sure those oil tankers can keep coming and the USA trying to threaten and wanting to have the ability to cut off China's oil supply. That's the issue in the South China Sea. That's really all there is to it. What are your goals for 2025? I would like the membership of CPI to expand. My big goal for 2025 is we've got to make sure there's 400 people at our convention in Chicago. And that's not going to be easy. I think we can do it. I think we can very easily do it. But it's going to be a challenge. I shouldn't say we can very easily do it. I think we can do it, but it's going to be a challenge. My big goal, if you really want to get specific, is to change the way CPI operates. We have got to stop thinking like an internet niche. Every Wednesday night at the Center for Political Innovation, we're having recruitment meetings. Because right now, the main way people join CPI is they're looking for these obscure politics and topics that I talk about. They find this YouTube channel. They like what I'm saying. They join CPI. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad, but that is not going to work. CPI is not going to become a mass organization if we continue to operate that way. We need to understand how to bring in people who would never go looking for this kind of organization. And we have strategies for how to do that, but it's not easy. And right now, many of our members, they don't have the experience. I've spent years going out and meeting people and selling them newspapers and building relationships and stuff. But, there's a lot of people in our group who don't have that experience, and that's fine. Where are you going to get it? They don't teach you that in school. So we have to learn a new move. We have to learn to become an outreach-oriented organization. We have to start witnessing, as would be said by Gavin and some other people I know. We have to start soul winning, as Gavin would say. We have to become an outreach-oriented group. We cannot continue to be an internet niche, right? At this point, if you are in our internet niche, you know about us, right? If you are part of the, people that are interested in the kind of politics we talk about, you know about us. And if you like us, you joined us, or you're thinking about joining us, or and if you don't, you don't. So if we're going to grow, we have to stop recruiting on the basis of being an internet niche. We cannot do that any longer. It's not going to work, right? We have to become an outreach-oriented organization, and that is not an easy thing. And I tell people it's almost like gymnastics. This is like gymnastics or diving or synchronized swimming. We have to learn a new move, and it takes practice. And so we're changing the culture of CPI to become outreach-oriented, and it's not an easy thing to do, and there's a lot of failure, right? I mean, outreach is not rewarding, because often, the number of people who reject you is often much higher than the people who accept you. It's not an easy thing to do, and there's an art to it. But we're going to change, because if we continue to be an internet niche, we don't really have an organizational future. And we had a number of people quit CPI. I'll be real with you, in 2024, and that was a good thing. All right. And I know that doesn't sound, like a nice thing to say, like, Caleb, you shouldn't want people to quit. Well, the reason these people quit is they didn't want us to become an outreach-oriented group. I mean, it's that simple, right? I mean, these people who were in pretty key positions in CPI told me that the idea of getting 400 people at our convention coming up was ridiculous, and we shouldn't even want that. And that just wanting 400 people to come to a CPI convention was just about your ego, Caleb. It's just about your ego. You always want more. You're never satisfied with CPI. You always want more. Yeah, that's my goddamn job, And if I was making you do things you didn't want to do, or compelling you to do things you didn't want to do, you would have every right to complain about it. I was not doing that. But there were certain people that had weaseled their way into positions in CPI, and some who had worked very, very hard to build the organization, but blatantly said, we don't want the organization to grow. I don't know why. Because they're tired, or because they wanted to be the boss and make people fill out forms. That was one I heard, right? Because there was a fear that they wouldn't get to be the boss anymore, or that there was a fear that I had too much energy, and it just, Caleb, you have this childlike enthusiasm. You just always want to build. Yeah. Yes, I do. Right. And, that is what has made CPI work. That's what's gotten me where I've gotten in. I mean, do you think I would have achieved anything I'd achieved in life if I was a pessimistic person? No. So, there were people that when I said, look, we have got to start growing, we've got to start recruiting, they just couldn't handle it. And they wanted to make CPI members fill out forms every time they had an idea. And Peter Coffin and I both said, excuse me? No. We got to make people fill out forms. We got to make them fill out forms. I'm like, no, we're not going to turn into the DMV. We're not going to fill out forms. And there were just certain people that they had just decided CPI must not grow. One of them, I think, later admitted that she didn't really, she I don't know. I don't want to get into specifics. One of them, I think, had another agenda the whole time related to something internationally. The other, I think there's some other things. But regardless, there were some people in CPI who did not want CPI to grow. Well, we needed to grow. Then on top of that, it just became very blatantly clear we had to stop being communists, because the word communism is somebody else's private property. Look, you can argue all day that we're the real communists. You can. And I mean, I started out this stream talking about how Marx was anti-Malthusian, believed in growth and all that. But at this point, the word communism is somebody else's private property. Communism belongs to Satan in America, not around the world. The Chinese Communist Party does great things. Vietnamese Communist Party does great things. Russian Communist Party does great things, but in America, communism is Satan's private property, right? It is the property of Malthusians, even though Marx wrote pages and pages and pages against degrowth and Malthusianism. Communism is the property of jealous, resentful, communism in America is the property of Claudia Dela Cruz and Brian Becker and lots of other evil people that are fighting over who gets to be the king of communism. I am not interested in being the king of communism. That is not my goal. My goal is to build an anti-imperialist movement in America, a mass anti-imperialist movement to save our country from the emerging low-wage police state and World War III. And if trying to hold on to I'm the real communist gets in my way of doing that, forget it. I don't believe in dialectical materialism. I don't. I think dialectical materialism is a bit harmful. I think spirituality is key in building the kind of movement we want to build. I don't think confrontation and struggle is the way to resolve things. I would like to see unity and reconciliation and forgiveness, etc. I don't want to put out resentful vibes in the universe. So I don't own and claim dialectical materialism as my philosophical worldview. It just isn't. And on top of that, communism at this point has become there are just, look, I am done trying to have the fight over who's the real communist. There is work that really needs to be done that is not predicated on who's the real communist, right? I would like to build a mass anti-imperialist movement. I would like to stop World War III, and I would like to stop the emerging low-wage police state. And I'd like to build an organization that teaches the ideas that I believe in toward that end. Holding on to I'm the real communist impedes our ability to do that. Now, there are people who just couldn't handle that. Oh my God, but communism is my special way to be different. Caleb, I was there once. Not saying you're a bad person, but that's just not the way we're operating at this time. We're changing. So, 2024 was a year that CPI really matured as an organization. And it was for the better. So my goal is to really cement those changes, really have us start learning to reach out to people who would never go looking for us and not be an internet niche. I would like to see us learn to more effectively carry out real operations. I would like to see us solidify relationships better, right? We have people who come around and we don't solidify a relationship with them. We need to learn to solidify relationships better. One thing we're thinking about, anyway, we got a lot of different ideas. I can't, talk about them all on here, but, we're doing the recruitment meetings every Wednesday to change our orientation toward recruitment. And what I need you to do is I need you to come to Washington, D.C., because it's going to be great. It's going to be a great, great, great event. We need you there. So register if you're planning to come. It's going to be a great event in Washington, D.C. Please donate to the Inauguration Fund if you can. That would be great. We got a lot of work to do, folks. I'm very, very excited. I'm very, very excited. I am an anti-imperialist to my bones. I am very proud of our organization and all we did to stand with the Uhuru movement this year or last year, all that we did to expose Kamala Harris, all that we did to raise the Peace MAGA operation. I'm proud of what we're about to do in D.C. We got so many people headed to D.C., and we're going to carry out a great operation in D.C., and I'm very happy about it. We're going to be in the streets, and we're going to be having a great event, and, good things are happening. So, dare to struggle, dare to win. I am very, very optimistic. And on that note, folks, I'm going to put on the closing music because that's all the super chats that we've got. We've done almost 4 hours tonight. So there we go. New upsurge. in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.